Football star Maris Verpakovskis kicked off the tie-break match between Shahryar Mamedyarov and Jan Krzysztof Duda. The Azeri Grandmaster got a significant advantage in the first rapid before playing the mysterious move h5. He gave up 2 pawns to weaken Duda's king, but this proved enough only for the perpetual check. The Pole started the second encounter in typical Mamedyarov style by pushing his g-pawn very early on, but Shahryar commented afterwards that he knew precisely how to react and that the key consists in centralizing one's pieces without being scared of an attack. He convincingly refuted his opponent's strategy and cashed in the whole point. Alexander Grishuk qualified as well thanks to win in the first rapid game against Yu Yangyi. The Russian played the strong novelty bishop c7 but labeled his third move h3 as rather primitive. Yu Yangyi obtained enough activity for his damaged pawn structure but later blundered with bishop b4. Grishuk won a pawn and converted in the endgame. Yu Yangyi's attempt to create some active play in the second game did not prove fruitful, as Russian defended confidently to obtain his qualification. The tiebreak between Sergei Karyakin and Wesley So followed the same rhythm as both previous classical games. Nothing really happened in all 4 rapids, as both players neutralized each other's thanks to their solid openings with black. Everything changed in the blitz as both games witnesses incredible turnarounds. Wesley So first misplayed the opening with 11th knight c3 and decided to sacrifice his queen for 2 pieces and 2 pawns. The practical decision confused Karyakin, who played suboptimal moves and eventually blundered horribly with 30th rook d6. The opening of the second game did not go well for the Russian, but he survived a seemingly deadly attack and even took the upper hand. He had several wins on move 33, but chose to grab f7 pawn with the rook, thus allowing an eliminatory perpetual check. We are glad to welcome everybody to the semi-finals of Riga FIDE World Chess Grand Prix. And the games are about to start. I believe we will have a special guest, well, really special guest today, to make a first move in the game between Maxim Vachier-Lagrave and Alexander Grishuk.
So it's nobody else but Mairis Briedis, a world champion of cruiserweight category in the boxing. And he is a especially popular sportsman in Latvia, currently holding the title of the world champion in the VBO category and winning 26 matches and just 1 loss, which was quite a famous game against Alexander Usyk, who has now moved to the heavyweight. And yeah, he got to make this first move in the game between Maxim Vachier-Lagrave against Alexander Grishuk.
Yeah, and the second semi-final you could see as well. Shahryar Mamedyarov today has the white pieces against Wesley So. Both of those players, as well as Alexander Grishuk, they play the tiebreak yesterday.
Right.
Yeah, well, got confused. So yesterday it was a huge tiebreak, and well, Wesley So had the most job to do. Well, only in the blitz games he managed to win against Sergei Karyakin. So Wesley So, as you can see, facing Mamedyarov. Mamedyarov today has the white pieces. And Grishuk plays black against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. Maxim, by the way, is the only player who didn't play tiebreak yet, right? So he won both of his matches in quite convincing manner, winning the first classical game, then making draw in the second one from the better position in both cases.
And yesterday we were discussing about this. What is more advantageous, having a free day, being able to rest, or still having this need to come out and play a tiebreak, still feel the flow of the game? And we cannot exactly understand what is more important, but I don't think Alexander Grishuk exactly complains having the need to play the tiebreak, because he finished both of the tiebreaks relatively quickly.
Yeah, well, Grishuk was quite convincing during the tiebreak displays. And yeah, well, it's hard to say. Maxim seems to be very happy with how the tournament goes and doesn't mind the free day. He was playing the previous event, which finished like few days before the Riga Grand Prix, the Grand Chess Tour event in Croatia. So, well, quite a lot of classical games for Maxim in a row. That means, I believe, he enjoys his free days. Well, not that he had some extra time to prepare, because tiebreaks were played yesterday and therefore finished quite late, right? So I believe mostly he spent his rest day, well, taking rest. Yeah,
Yes.
that's what the rest days are for.
And Maxime is extremely, especially determined to fight for the spot in the candidates tournament. It is among his top priorities this year, and so far he's doing great. Playing the first leg for him, the FIDE Grand Prix, being in the semi-final, not having played a single tiebreak and earning quite a lot of bonus points, which might be important for a later phase.
This might be very, very important, and I believe we are preparing the graphics with up-to-date Grand Prix standing for the current moment, where, as it's easy to guess, so far the leader is Alexander Grishuk, simply because he took part in both legs, well, the first leg in Moscow and here in Riga, and so far doing quite well. Shahryar Mamedyarov, that's once again a second tournament for him, but in the first one he got eliminated in round 1 against Polish player Radoslav Wojtaszek.
There are a couple of players who have already lost their chances to qualify for the candidates. I'm afraid I won't forget anybody. I believe yesterday it was Sergei Kuryakin who lost probably even theoretical chances to qualify for the candidates through the Grand Prix. Before that it was Levon Aronian, and who else was there?
Levon Aronian, I believe Anish Giri, who lost both of his, on both of his appearances he lost in round 1. So it's a really tough tournament, and well, it might seem that this is the most, the most logical way to qualify for the candidates. We have one spot from rating, we have one spot reserved for Caruana as the loser of World Championship match. But other than that, it's either the finals of Grand Prix, finals of World Cup, which is 128 players, and then you have to make all the way to the finals. It's Grand Swiss, once again, a lot of players, only one place. So here, while you have 2 places, while you have 3 tournaments, it might seem to be easier. But with this particular format, at knockout, you don't really have a chance to come back in the tournament after you lose.
I mean, exactly. For example, Levon Aronian, he's such a great player. He was knocked out in both of the tournaments at the first round. It only proves how really tough is this tournament, and the players and the format is pretty much unpredictable. So that's really amazing.
Absolutely. So we have, while we were talking, we do have the opening moves in both games. And honestly, I'm not disappointed, even though Grishuk decided not to play the Sicilian, but to go for a Berlin. But I'm fine looking at the Berlin positions as long as this is the endgame. And the real Berlin endgame that always is the choice for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He's one of the few principal players who seemingly never went for Rook E1 against the Berlin or any kind of sidelines, but always enters the Berlin endgame. Interestingly enough, the other player that I can mention is Alexander Grishuk. so they're facing
they
each
share
other.
a common habit, right?
Yeah, and Grishuk with white, he also likes to play the endgame, but I believe, we have the other game on a camera view, Mamedyarov against Wesley So, and here we have a very, very interesting line in the Catalan.
Yeah, this is one of the lines which I was mentioning, one of the first days that when I believe Yu Yangyi was playing against Levon Aronian, he was testing this knight e5 and presumably tried to squeeze water out of stone. And back then we mentioned that there is this challenging idea to play knight a3 and go for a more complex idea, which actually happened in the game. And I wonder if this is just a test of the knowledge, if the opponent is actually well prepared, or there might be a new idea on the board.
So let's see. So that's the key position, kind of the, perhaps this is the first crossroad when you can play queen c2 or knight e5. After knight e5, black almost exclusively plays knight c6, and then you can do what Yu Yangyi did, to take with the bishop, take with the knight, exchange on e7, and so on. So, where white is trying for a minimal advantage, it never worked for Yu Yangyi. He made 2 draws against Aronian, not really having any advantage in one of those games. So, knight takes c6 is the other approach. Knight takes, pawn takes. Now to capture with the bishop is considered to be not so attractive. Black plays rook b8 and then pretty quickly plays bishop b7, exchanges the bishops, goes c5.
Right.
So, gets quite a decent initiative for well, to compensate for his damaged pawn structure. But knight a3 is one very, very interesting move, which, well, practically forces black to take, otherwise white enjoys a very nice Catalan edge after knight takes c4. So bishop a3, ba3, bishop to a6, once again trying to preserve the c4 pawn, queen d2, rook b8, and then they've played a few moves more, queen to a5, rook b6.
And I believe a4 was
a4 was played
here
by Mamedyarov, yeah.
It's quite interesting that, as far as I know, the evaluation of the computer of this line usually is a small plus for black, but usually it's misleading. I mean, black is holding this extra pawn on the c4, but those are triple pawns. The bishop on a6 might be potentially stuck. So white's whole idea is try to bring out the pieces, not to lose any more material. And let's say if he manages, for example, to play bishop a3 followed by e3, rook c1, and take the pawn on c4.
Yeah, rook c1.
He might just end up in a strategically winning position.
Yeah, even with bishop f1 and so on, yeah. Well, so those are usually very interesting positions, because if I remember well, there was some line starting with queen c8, bishop to a3. Yeah, interestingly, don't even mention queen takes d4 for whatever reason.
Must be
bishop a3 wins in exchange with bishop c5 to follow, or an immediate bishop e3. Right. So queen c8, bishop a3, rook d8, bishop c5. And then it's really awkward for black to move the rook. But as far as I remember, black doesn't really move the rook. So he's just sacrificing in exchange, recaptures with the pawn, and then plays this one on.
And then black has a very strong pass pawn and a healthy pawn structure. So.
Yeah, well, it improves, of course, black's pawn structure.
Right.
So after a4, queen d6 was played by Wesley So. That's another idea.
And a3.
Queen d6 and a3.
This is something interesting.
The point was, of course, that bishop f4 is met with queen b4. He's met with queen b4, intending to swap the queens. So therefore, a3, covering the b4 square, and once again planning to play bishop to f4.
If I can believe my database, a3 is an actual novelty. So far, queen d6 has been played before by a number of people, including, I mean, the most notable amongst them probably Radoslav Wojtaszek against Dmitry Yakovenko. Those are the biggest names.
Oh, okay. So Wojtaszek played it for black, right?
No, in this particular game, he might have played with black. In this particular game, he was playing against Yakovenko.
So Yakovenko played it.
Right, and there have been tried a number of moves. For example, rook f to d1, queen c3, e4 is by far the most popular choice, but a2, a3 is an actual novelty, and you can see that Wesley is already in a deep think mode. He doesn't recognize this move.
Yeah, and shock with all his appearances trying to, to put some extra psychological pressure. I mean, that's what you do. You play a new move, and then you stand up from the board, you're walking and kind of hinting at your opponent that, yeah, please, what do you have this one prepared? Do you know what to do after a3? It shouldn't be like the move which breaks the evaluation of the line. Yeah, right. Logically, if it is a good position for black, it should be still holdable, and yeah, it doesn't look revolutionary. Like
although it does look weird, right? I mean, white is voluntarily wasting on tempo, but I would imagine, I mean, I don't know what Shahryar Mamedyarov has prepared for this particular game, but I would imagine if you play a3, you are planning to play something like bishop d2 and bishop b4 afterwards, because you cannot really play bishop a3 in one go, because queen c3 would be probably the most natural try, and after queen...
Yeah, and what was happening after queen c3? So point of queen c3 being that if black wants to swap the queens, he actually loses the exchange. Yeah,
right. And queen c3 has been played 3 times before, and in 2 of those games, black opted to play knight f6 to d5, attacking the queen, and white doesn't really have the time to play bishop a3 immediately. Or in one game, which I mentioned, Radoslav Wojtaszek against Dmitry Yakovenko back in 2016, he played rook f8 to d8. So that was the game, and it's actually a relatively unexplored line. So no wonder that Shahryar decided to at least try it on the board and see what happens.
Yes, once again, I can imagine rook d8, and you go bishop f4, your opponent takes on d4, swap happens, bishop e3, and then some c5, and who knows what's that.
Yeah, probably that might have been the idea. So it's so important at this level, you cannot just outplay your opponent with brute force. I mean, everybody has a fantastic positional technique. Everybody is calculating lines so well. So you need an opening surprise. I mean, if you want to score a win, and let's see, I mean, if Shak will actually manage to do it.
Yeah, right. Apart from bishop d2, bishop b4, there is potentially just a bishop f4 move, right?
But the idea
Driving
not to allow
queen away, yeah.
b4, right?
So there is no queen b4 in response. But then I'm not sure, say, black plays rook b8, bishop f4, queen d7. I'm not sure what this bishop does on f4. Maybe it is better to play bishop d2, bishop b4, and finally bring it to c5.
Well, at least strategically wise, it looks interesting, and but it's not clear what black should do. I mean, he has so many appealing moves here to calculate. I mean, something like rook d8, rook b8, perhaps even knight e5. What about even a simple move as c4, c3 looks interesting. I mean, you have to understand all of these moves. I mean,
c3 planning to capture on e2.
Right.
If the pawn on c3 is taken, there is no e3 for white because, you know, bishop takes on f1. c3 actually makes a lot of sense.
So you can see Shak being clearly relaxed. Perhaps he's trying just to remember the lines, what were actually there, try to freshen up his analysis, what was done as a part of the homework. So it's not really pleasant for Wesley to be in this situation, but still, I mean, they're used to this situation. People tend to surprise their opponents all the time, even at this level. So even if he falls behind on the clock, at least something like 30, 40 minutes, it's no big deal. I've seen a number of high-level games, one of the players falling behind the clock at least, maybe perhaps 1 hour, and then they still manage to solve the problems and escape.
Yeah, remember... well, those impressive games in some very sharp niders, like this poisoned pawn variation, and then, a novelty is played, and then the opponent is spending 40 minutes and still, of course, unable to calculate everything because the position is so complex. But just, I mean, you decide for something. So that's, well, maybe this is not such a sharp position, but still, you're looking for a balance between, like, your move making sense, being correct, and at the same time you look for something that your opponent might have not analyzed at home. Yeah, so like to drag it to an unexplored territory.
Right. I mean, otherwise you are playing essentially against a computer, and it's not a pleasant thing, right? I mean, you are not playing against, let's say in this case, you're not playing against Shahryar Mamedyarov. You are essentially playing against Stockfish, the 10th version.
Whatever, yeah.
So it's not. It doesn't feel really nice. So you want to make your opponent start to think on himself as quickly as possible by not making big positional mistakes. So it's not easy to be done. But by the way, looking at the historical performance from both of the players, they've played between each other number of times, and in the classical games, Shahryar Mamedyarov has beaten Wesley So 2 times, but he suffered the only loss just a couple of weeks ago when they played in Grandchester in Zagreb.
Yeah, that was a nice game played by Wesley with the white pieces. Shahryar went for the line which I believe we have to call Dubov's Gambit, the same line that Daniil Dubov has played against Giri in first round of Moscow Grand Prix with black, which involves an early pawn sacrifice on e5. Well, the pawn was taken, later on was returned. Now I'm talking about Wesley So against Mamedyarov game. Yeah, and it was slight positional pressure, and that's usually how Wesley So wins his game. So he preferred to be solid, but yeah, well, just a slight positional pressure, and a lot of his opponents collapsed under this.
Yeah, so I wonder if you'll see this line actually in this match, or at least among the games in Riga Grand Prix. It is extremely popular right now, so I mean, who knows?
Right, and then let's not forget, we have the other game, Vashiela Graf against Grishuk, where we were not sure about the opening from Grishuk as early as move 1. Right, because there are options. Alexander is known to play the Najdorf. Well, recently he picked up the Sveshnikov, Sicilian, so e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6. That was played as well between Grishuk and Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. Right, but today he went for e5, and I believe there were games previously played with these moves between the players.
I mean, Alexander Grishuk has played against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave a number of times. They have a great length of history between them. They have a huge rivalry going on. Most notably, they were playing against each other in 2017 World Cup in Tbilisi, where the classical games finished in a draw, and then Maxim managed to win the tiebreaks and move to the quarterfinal. But still, despite the fact that Alexander Grishuk lost the match in the World Cup back in 2017, he has never lost to Maxim Vachier-Lagrave a classical game.
And he has won at least one, I
Just
believe.
one, yeah. If my calculations were correct, he won one game playing last year in the Isle of Man tournament, I mean, which is this year known as the Grand Swiss. And there have been many draws in the classical games. And when it comes to the rapid and blitz section, then apparently Maxim is a slight favorite, leading with the score, but not by a big margin.
Yeah, well, that's surprising, to be honest, that we can call someone a slight favorite against Grishuk when it comes to rapid and blitz. But indeed, yes, Maxim's results are somewhat superior, at least in their direct encounters.
I mean, at least we haven't seen how he plays blitz here in Riga, and he is currently the world's #1 in blitz. So that has to count for something.
Yeah, while we are commentating this event, let's not forget there is a blitz tournament going on here in Riga, a big event in memory of Mikhail Tal. So the rapid tournament finished yesterday with Vladimir Fedoseev being the winner. And some players, well, to be exact, 2 players from the Grand Prix who got eliminated, they joined the action. So David Navara finished second, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct.
And Nikita Vityukov didn't make it to the prizes. Okay,
it was actually
the top
quite,
3.
It was actually quite interesting. They played against each other. The unfortunate players of the first round, Nikita Vityukov and David Navara, they actually met in the tournament, and they played, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was the 10th round. And David Navara was victorious, and he finished in second place, which is, I mean, still a very good result for the Czech Grandmaster. And the third place was, I believe it was Rasmus Swane from Germany.
Yep.
Right. So it was a huge tournament yesterday. I mean, it was held for 2 days. Almost 300 players, over 50 Grandmasters. You can imagine. I mean, it was a huge hall filled with Grandmasters, very strong players. I mean, and today they're playing the blitz section.
Yeah. So, coming back to this game, and as I said, when you have Maxim Vachier-Lagrave playing with white against the Berlin, you can be sure it will be the Berlin endgame. And yeah, this game is no exception. Knight d6, takes on e5. So far so good. h3, bishop e7.
So Maxim is a very principled player, I would say.
Yeah, well, same as with black. His repertoire is quite narrow, but very well studied, right? So it's exclusively Najdorf against e4, exclusively Kronfeld against d4.
Right.
And with white, yeah, he tends to prefer the same lines, more or less. So h3 and not h5 from Grishuk, but bishop to e7, knight c3, still giving a chance to play h5, knight h4, takes, rook to e1, and somewhat surprising move, a7, a5. Well, the idea is not new, and I believe some people were playing a5 as early as here. Well, like Belarusian Grandmaster Alexandrov, who was playing the Berlin before it became mainstream, I believe before Vladimir Kramnik's match against Garry Kasparov. Alexandrov was already playing this endgame, and I believe a5, even in this position, like as the reply on knight c3, it's possible that he was playing a5. So a5, sort of inconcrete move, right? So, well, we take some space on the queen side potentially. Let's see how white reacts to this, and later on we'll make the decision about where the king is going, where the bishop is developed. Knight to e2 played by Maxim.
I mean, ideally, White would want to trade all of the pieces and move to the pawn endgame and somehow try to claim that he has basically an extra pawn at the king side. And that's usually the whole point of this endgame, but it is easier said than done because it is so difficult for White to exchange this powerful light squared bishop on c8, which usually is activated by playing the standard moves as b6, c5, then put the bishop on the long diagonal and actually create quite a serious counterplay. And there have been a number of games where Black scores a very nice positional victory in this line.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other problem for White is in comparison with the exchange variation of Ruy Lopez, where you have your pawn on e4, right? The pawn is already on e5. So first of all, of course, it makes Black's light square bishop much more active. And then later on, especially if, let's say, the dark square bishops are getting exchanged, king e7 and king e6 in some positions. Once again, if the knight is not on e2 but somewhere else on e4, yeah, then king e6 sometimes comes, attacks the e5 pawn. So it's not as simple for White as that might seem.
Yeah, so you can see Alexander is trying to remember something. Definitely, he still should be well within his analysis. Yeah, I believe all of the moves here for Black look pretty much the same, so I believe it's more important about the structure. So, yeah, in which order of the moves try to execute it? I mean,
could
c6,
it be
b5?
that he has to start with this, like rook e8, to figure out where the knight is going? And then, I mean, it feels nice to attack the e5 pawn,
Right.
the moment White can't really defend it.
And something like knight f4, I would imagine, is the big idea.
Ah, yeah, knight
And something
f4.
like knight h5 is the threat.
Ah, knight h5. That's why they play it this way. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe this is where the knight is going, because I honestly thought that this is like, yeah, knight f4, knight h5. Now I realize it might actually be quite annoying if the knight is getting
It must
there.
have been the idea, at least, that White wants to put the knight on f4 and, for example, at some moment play e5, e6, force the trade of the pawns, and thus forcing Black to give up the bishop on c8. So essentially, he forms this extra pawn advantage at the king side and having trade the bishop for the knight, which is in White's favor.
Yeah, that's precisely what I thought as well. Like if you're trying to play it slow, b6, for instance, yeah, then even knight d4, e6, or knight f4 followed by e6, yeah,
Right.
might be a bit unpleasant, because with bishop being on h4, you kind of don't have the luxury to answer e6 with f6, which sometimes the players in Berlin they actually do, right? But not here. Like if White plays e6, where next move f6 seems unlikely. So knight e2, and Grishuk has started to think. And meanwhile, it seems we have another move from Wesley Sol, because Mamedyarov is back to the board. So a3 was played pretty quickly, rook f b8.
It was also quite a quick move, still taking into account that Wesley probably was surprised. Well, perhaps he knew the idea.
Oh, well, my timer actually says he has spent almost 14 minutes on rook f b8.
Not according to my information, but maybe you're right.
Yeah. So this one, the PG and I have, it is connected to the physical digital board. So well, it claims rook f b8 took Wesley so 14 minutes to play, and then e4 quickly. So far, no surprises. And Black is thinking again. e4 was a very clear idea. I want to play e5. I want to win a piece.
What to do for Black? Because, I mean, White even wants to play a positional chess. He just wants to play bishop e3, presumably at some moment threatening to play d4, d5, targeting the rook on b6, or also including a positional idea to play rook f1 to c1, and potentially at some moment even might be possible something like bishop f1 and just grab the pawn on c4.
Win the pawn back.
So it's not so easy, I mean, for Black to understand how exactly should he proceed. Yeah, I don't know. C3 feels like a very committal move, but I mean, what to do afterwards? I mean, C3,
Yeah,
even
well,
rook e1?
C3, e5 as well. I mean,
Or e5.
I'm kind of bothered with this, because how realistic Black's counterplay is, nobody knows. Yeah, bishop f1.
bishop f1,
bishop
or even
f1, and
perhaps,
maybe c2, yeah?
perhaps there was an intermezzo move, bishop e3. There is there bishop e3, I don't know. I don't know,
Bishop
really.
f1, yeah, well,
Maybe it's too
hard
much
to
already.
say, yeah? Hard to say. So, well, c3 could be a possibility, but after c3, well, let me... Oh, well, then yeah, c3 might be a very reasonable move, because, once again, if queen takes, there is bishop f1. If rook d1, it's sort of awkward after c2, and
yeah, the c pawn continues the march.
possible rook b1.
So something like rook e1 or e5, I mean, you need to calculate this. But it's still quite unpleasant, especially when you're in Wesley's situation. I mean, your opponent is still well within preparation, so you do not want to go for a very complex and forcing line, which might just be a loss for you in the end.
Yeah, look, e5, queen takes, bishop e3. I think this is the way to do it for white. So that when the queen leaves, and queen doesn't really have such a lot of squares to leave, right? Because I'm planning to take the knight, you should be able to take on f1
right.
at least.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
definitely.
and then bishop b6.
Even that is great, right? And you cannot recapture with the pawn because the bishop on a6 is hanging. Yeah, probably you cannot really take. You cannot really play c3 continuing with queen takes on d4. So you would need to do something else. I don't know, retreat with the queen. Perhaps.
Yeah, like moving the queen or moving the knight. Those are similarly the options for black. Otherwise, it's not really clear. Well, this exchange sacrifice didn't seem to work previously, so it probably shouldn't work here as well.
Yeah.
Right? Bishop e3, or it's rather just losing the exchange, not sacrificing the exchange.
Yeah, and the reasoning is the same. You cannot recapture on b6 with the
bishop
pawn.
b6, yeah, if you would be able to do something like that, then at least black can think of it. Yeah, but just calmly taking with the rook shouldn't be enough compensation. Those pawns are tripled on c-file. So after e4, Wesley So might have an unpleasant task to solve.
Well, he must have expected it at least. I mean, rook f to b8, you make such a move and you expect e4 afterwards. So you're not definitely surprised. So
yeah, so maybe just moving the queen preventively?
Queen d8, so the question is, what happens after something like bishop e3? Is it knight g4? Well, still it's...
Yeah, bishop e3 sort of allows knight g4.
Still very much unclear.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, it seems white is not forced. Okay, the pawn on d4 was not possible to take, so maybe white can even play a move like bishop f4 just to move the rook on the very next move, because this pawn still seems to be a taboo. And bishop g5, black will play h6, of course, yeah. Okay,
I mean, there are a number of moves. Even a slow position move as h3 might be even possible, that you just want to play bishop e3 afterwards. And the question is, what is black going to do? I mean, okay, he has an extra pawn. Supposedly, he can play c4, c3. But let's, for example, let's imagine I'm playing the silly move h3. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, that's a serious question, because c3, once again, I'm just moving the rook, it seems. Right?
Right. So perhaps something like queen c8 to get rid of the need to protect the bishop on a6.
So that the rook is free. But then white captures on c3, and like you do have some jumping going on. But yeah, looks like white is maybe this position already that we can stop and say, yeah, white gets the pawn back. White is better, and the question is how much he is better.
It looks weird, right? I mean, black played queen d6, then he would play rook f to b8, and then he's supposed to do what? I mean, go back queen d8 and queen c8?
Yeah, I mean, if black was sort of looking for this kind of setup with rooks on b file and queen on c8, then of course he should have preferred queen d7 and then rook to b8 and then queen to c8. But in this case, of course, you have to make sure that bishop a3, bishop c5 is not scary.
Right, and then obviously Shak wouldn't play a3 after queen d6. So perhaps it's not even a big deal. I mean, white wasted the tempo on a3, and black is ready to waste the tempo for the queen. So that might be the case. And still, I mean, I like white's chances better. Probably the position is about balanced, as black has their extra pawn, and there's at least no clear way how white is gonna regain the pawn at least immediately, but still, I mean, white's play seems to be, I mean, easier. It is easier.
Yeah, could it be that he has to do this? Okay. Let's try to do it this way.
So what about
Knight
bishop f4?
d7, yeah. And in case of bishop f4, I was finally hoping to take on d4. Point being that queen on a5 is not protected, so it seems I'm not losing a d7 knight. I have queen c5, even though you take and take on c7 in this case. Because the other line, our previous idea of playing bishop e3 taking on b6, this time might sort of work for black. Not really.
It doesn't really.
Queen e5.
Yeah. That's a nice idea.
Yeah, now it was sort of a nice idea. Point was that, yeah, if white trades, takes on b6, black takes with the pawn, and he's relatively happy. The knight is getting on d3. But the problem with this is that a white takes in different orders. So first on b6, where you can't swap the queens and you cannot yet recapture with the pawn because bishop on a6 is hanging. So rook b6, queen takes, knight takes, perhaps does give black slight compensation, but it's not, of course, not the same thing as with improved pawn structure. So here, white should be better.
Now that I'm looking at this position, I do not really see any different way how for black to unwind from these annoying pins than to position the queen to c8 and then try to activate the rook, perhaps queen c8, queen d8, c8, and rook b3 and try
rook
to
d3
do some
maybe, yeah.
rook d3. I mean, this makes sense. Otherwise, apart from that, I do not see anything because queen takes on d4, like we mentioned, it doesn't really work. What to do? I mean, bishop f4 is still a positional threat to reckon with, but what to do else? I mean, bishop a6 cannot go back to b7 or c8, so you need to activate something.
No, c5, no, e5, it does seem to be like a very nice positional idea from Mamedyarov to play a4, a3 to secure white's queen position on a5, which is very annoying for black. It actually ties down nearly all of black's forces. So no c5, no e5, the bishop on a6 is constantly hanging.
Yeah, it's a nice try from Mamedyarov, who definitely isn't going for a quick draw in this game. If you play knight a3 in this opening, it means you are there to fight. We are glad to see that.
Yeah, and looking at the clock of the players, Mamedyarov is on 1 hour 36. So that means he actually managed to get a lot of extra time.
So it's extra 6 minutes to the starting time. It's always nice.
Well, a move by Grishuk in the other game. After knight e2, the bishop was developed to d7, and Grishuk switches to his usual mode of spending time, which is basically up to 10 minutes on every single move until the time trouble, and then he inevitably will have to speed up.
I like this move. It's a very smart waiting move because essentially black is not making any committal decisions. In case perhaps he is ready to play c5, b6 and transfer the bishop to c6, very often the king goes to c8 instead, in case something starts to happen on the d file, and I would imagine he is ready also to respond with something after knight f4. Probably it's something like rook e8, I would imagine. I don't know. I mean, after knight h5. Yeah, so let's say rook,
knight h5
and
you can
g6.
still play g6.
Right,
yeah.
it makes sense. And you cannot really go back because you have essentially lost time, and knight f6 is just equal.
Knight f6 is an extra piece for black because rook on e1 is not yet protected. Right. Yeah,
that was my great idea.
Maybe knight h5 is not to the point at all. Yeah,
perhaps
maybe
bishop d2 inclusion and then knight h5.
Yeah, has to develop the bishop to d2, c3 maybe.
Right, I forgot that the rook is not defended, but for example, I mean, let's say bishop d2 and some kind of useful move like c5 or b6.
Or maybe a4,
a4.
Because this pawn sometimes is hanging and the fitting is like anyway, I mean, if you can push it to a4, maybe you just do it.
Right.
And then knight h5, yes, essentially this is the line Arturs was talking about. Takes here. Yeah, by the way, sometimes this is an unpleasant position for black. It really depends if black is on time to somehow regroup his forces. So despite like a dry look of this position, it might be because bishop. I mean, if you don't play bishop e6, white's going to play rook e7, and this is disastrous. So
Right.
bishop e6, bishop b4. Let's
And
say
you need to watch
threatening
out
to capture.
for rook e6.
King goes here. It's like check, king e8,
And bishop e7.
and something like bishop e7. But in this case, you probably just take on a2 and you say, yes, my king is not moving, but I've taken another pawn. And yeah, but essentially what I mean, if white manages to get something like that, and then he starts trying to bring the king. If black reacts with h6, then the h and g pawns are pushed. So it's not yet dead equal if black is actually playing sort of a piece down. The king is not taking part in the game.
Right.
So even positions like that might be unpleasant.
And very often in this line, white's idea is try to move forward with the kingside pawns, but how to do it properly? I mean, it's easier said than done. You want to, for example, idealistically, I want to play g4, king g2, move the rook somewhere, f4, f5, and sort of form a passed pawn, or at least take control of many squares. But the problem is that g2, g4 is still a very committal move, and it jumps directly under the standard response h7, h5. So you're going to do it really immediately.
Yeah, g4 immediately would be... Okay,
Probably
so already
disaster,
would lead,
right.
you know, to some really, really crazy complications.
Right.
Or maybe just
No, it's just
a disaster. Yeah, but for some moment I was looking at this, like g5, and is this bishop in danger? The question's going to be, because bishop h3 doesn't seem to work because of knight f4. I'm attacking the bishop, and then when the bishop goes away, knight g2 traps the other guy, traps the guy on h4. So, but yeah, of course, this is not what white normally looking for.
Yeah, it looks counterintuitive, so definitely, unless this is a well deep prepared idea, I don't think that white can voluntarily go here.
Yeah, so somehow you want to move all the stuff really in a slow fashion, maybe even playing g3, king g2 first, then f4 in the right moment. Yeah, so, well, not easy for white, indeed, yeah. In the long term, it seems that white has more significant factors to his favor, let's say. So the pawn's majority on the king side, that's...
Yeah, and Maxime has played bishop d2.
Bishop d2, once again, no commitments. First developing the bishop, bringing the rook to d1, perhaps the a rook. And then he will try to see where exactly he wants his pieces to be. And even the knight is not yet defined. Well, rather, the route for this knight is not defined, where the knight is going.
All right.
So, a4, rook e8. King c8, well, king c8 you probably don't want to hurry with, because in some positions you might actually want your king on e8. Black can switch back to this h5 plan. This is something to talk about, because it's very typical that h3 is met with h5, yeah?
Right.
So let's say if black plays h5 here, white goes with knight d4, perhaps threatening e6. Rook e8, knight f3, bishop has to retreat to e7, and bishop g5. For instance, positions like that, they're also very important in understanding of the whole line's evaluation. Bishop to g5, white swaps the bishops and then puts the knight on g5, tries to decide, yeah, I'm better forever. But it's not necessarily the case. And even...
Actually, it's very interesting. I read a commenter that so far, up to the, which I believe was the 12th move, players were following the game. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave against Levon Aronian in 2018 London Chess Classic. And
up to this moment,
up to rook
e1.
Up to rook e1. And in the game here, Alexander played a5. If I'm not mistaken, because these moves
there was a5, and Aronian has played b7, b6, and eventually lost.
Yeah, and eventually Maxime managed to win the game, so we can perhaps show...
Yeah, we can look, yeah, so that is, once again, London Classics 2018,
right,
which was the final event for Grand Chess Tour Series, and game 1.4 means the rapid.
Right.
It was the rapid, so b6...
b6,
was played by Aronian.
g4, bishop e7.
g4.
You're right. I mean, this was the idea, just to try
perhaps
to...
h5, g5 is the trick.
And then rook e4. That's a nice.
Yeah. In this case, it's rook e4, like a threat immediately.
That's an interesting idea to
So
trap
bishop to
the bishop.
e7?
So bishop e7 has to retreat, and now black is sort of willing to play h5. And in the game was bishop e3 played, bishop d7, rook d1, king c8, knight e2. Now only Maxime, back then, at least in December of 2018, he played knight e2, rook e8, knight f4, bishop f8, and there was a long positional game going on, and Maxime managed to win this game and score a full point. So actually in this game there was a diversion, and Alexander Grishuk decided to play a5 and divert from the played path. So probably he was ready for this. I mean, this is not a secret that Maxime plays this line. So
yeah. And I'm wondering what was wrong with g2, g4. Because if this move works against b6, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't work against a5.
That's a very good question. Yeah.
So maybe the move itself is not that great, yeah?
I mean, what is the difference between a5 and b6? Probably there is no difference, because even I would imagine b6 might be even more favorable for black.
Because at some point at least you can play bishop a6. Yeah, a5 is like a really long-term move. Yeah, so well, yeah, I do want to get some space on the queen side, of course, yeah. In some remotely, like remote positions, maybe rook a6, rook b6 will materialize, but not now, really.
Right, and g4 is very committal move, and you can make this move also later. I mean, so yeah. I think also Maxime was thinking about that. Most likely, Grishuk is prepared for this line. It's not secret that he plays this with white, and probably he had prepared an improvement over this game, and this is why he actually chose knight e2 and bishop d2 in this situation, and it doesn't mean that he is not going to play g4 afterwards.
Yeah, so sooner or later white has to start moving his majority on the king side. That's more or less the only way white is capitalizing on his advantage in this line.
And actually, both of these players have already placed this particular line between each other back in 2018, although it was a blitz tournament.
Yeah.
And after the bishop takes on h4,
the whole line with knight h4 and exchange of the knights on h4 was already played.
It was already played between both of these players, and then Maxime chose to play bishop e3, although it was a blitz game, so I don't know how serious it is, I mean, to take this into account.
But we can quickly check it. So bishop d7?
Bishop d7, rook d1, king c8, rook d2, b6, doubling the rooks on the d file, rook d8, and now, only now, Maxime played knight e2, c5 and knight f4.
Knight f4 and
preceded by bishop c6, so the rook on d8 is defended by the bishop on h4.
Yeah.
e6, f takes, knight e6. I'm sorry for showing this line very quickly, but at least, I mean, this was a blitz game. After all, rook d2, bishop f6, and presumably black is just fine. I mean,
black is doing okay, it seems, despite that white still keeps his majority, but it's not that far advanced, yeah? And the feeling is that you play e6 only if you get some extra benefits, right? Because just to exchange pieces like that, you do give black some time to play king b7 to bring the rook to a center. So I believe like next couple of moves for black, king b7, rook e8, and then the power of two bishops, you know, and at some point black might be even better if you're not careful enough.
I mean, idealistically, if I was white, I would dream to exchange these dark squared bishops somehow.
Yeah, somehow to play bishop g5, yeah.
But how to do it? I mean, if you swap off the bishops, then probably the rooks also come off the board, and then we essentially have the knight versus the bishop. I play c3, a3, I block the pawns, and I just play with the next pawn.
Yeah, like something like this. Bishop g5, and let's imagine black cooperates, because I believe black can just snap
take
the pawn on b2. Yeah, but let's imagine black... I know, that's just terrible, yeah, because knight d8.
Right.
Okay, something. h6, bishop takes, pawn takes, rook to d8. And again, I've lost the pawn. I'm trying to get this position with material equal. We have a3, king b7. Yeah, but even this,
this jumps under knight d8.
This jumps under knight d8.
Yeah, not very realistic, but still.
Yeah, but the point is, white is. How do they play in, in exchange Ruy Lopez? they put it somehow like this, so that the king cannot enter, and basically black's extra pawn on the queen side is neutralized.
Right.
And then white pushes g4, f4, trying to get the passed pawn on the other wing.
But I mean, it's still not easy. Even if white would somehow get this position, it's still not easy to convert. I mean, this whole setup of the Berlin system is so tricky and so tough to break, and no wonder that Garry Kasparov was powerless to do something against Vladimir Kramnik back in 2000. I mean.
Yeah, so once again, rook a1, this, bishop d2, no, h5 was already my move, bishop d2 was played, Grishuk is thinking. So, just to illustrate, let's say this happens, black goes b6, and now plays a bad move, king c8. So, this is the moment where you very much like to play e6.
Right.
I mean, this is what, say, the setup white is trying to get. So, e6, black takes with the pawn, and you take on g7. Then you have a nice blockade square on e5, and your g and h pawns are marching forward.
And here you actually can start to do something real, because now those two bishops are not really so powerful. Black actually has some weaknesses, and potentially one of the pair of the bishops is going to be exchanged, so this would be really a great position for white to achieve. And definitely Maxim is no stranger to this line. He has played this line more than a few times. For example, he also did play it against Sergei Karyakin, yet another player from the Riga Grand Prix. They played it back in the Batumi Olympiad last year, and the game commenced after the bishop takes on h4, the 11th move. Here Maxim chose to play bishop e3, which is so far his most popular response in this position, and black responded with h5. Now Maxim played knight e2. It's the same idea all over.
Yeah.
And after bishop e7, white played f4, presumably with the idea to push the pawn forward, and black responded with f5, trying to blockade the pawn. And after e takes, g takes, rook d1 check, king e8, f5, and king f7, black in the end managed to make a draw. Although it's still very much positionally unclear position.
Yeah, I'd say this one does look promising for white. Well, perhaps he's not in time to play g4, regrettably, because otherwise, yeah, that would be, like, let's say g4 and nothing is hanging for some reason, because I believe in reality, if you play g4, you're about to lose some material, but let's imagine it doesn't really hanging. And then king g2, king f3, and we will get some sort of this Laska Capablanca endgame, right, where Laska has put the pawn on f5, restricted the c8 bishop, and then won in fashion. And I believe this endgame in many endgame books, as well as books on exchanged relopes.
So, I mean, both of the players are well prepared in this line, so all it matters is the various nuances and who understands this endgame better. That is the biggest question.
King to c8 played by Grishuk, so once again, the move which doesn't define anything, just another waiting, well, or rather useful move.
Yeah, because normally you don't want to position the king on the e file, especially now that the white rook stands on e1 and potentially is threatening to play something like knight f4 and e6 at some time. So king c8, just in case, remove the king. So let's say if white proceeds with something like knight f4 and e6, after the trade of the pawns, there is no check on e6.
There won't be a check on e6. Yeah, right. So, well, I believe both players so far know what they are doing.
Yeah, we probably should switch back to the game. Shahryar Mamedyarov against Wesley So.
Yeah, well, So spent quite a lot of time, namely 20 and a half minutes, and he has played c4, c3. The move that we were criticizing, we were saying that this move is not possible, judging by Shah's reaction. Look, Shah has started to think, so that means this move was sort of not analyzed or was not one of the priorities.
Right.
Because, yeah, if black, let's say, plays a normal move, the move you expect, then you play a tempo. That's what Shahryar was doing. So it kind of suggests that the move itself is not so great.
Well, probably. I mean, you cannot prepare everything. You prepare as many lines as possible, but I mean, the number of variations, this tree of lines, is so huge. I would imagine probably C3 wasn't among the top choices. It was possible, perhaps, a move before or move after, but right now, probably it was something like fourth or fifth move from the computer's suggestion. You just cannot cover everything.
Okay, so what happens if I play e5, and as we figured out, queen takes d4, bishop e3 seems to be terrible for black. Let me check it again. So say queen moves somewhere, like g4. I take on b6. Could it be that bishop f1 intermediate is possible? Bishop to c7.
And bishop g2.
Bishop g2, bishop b8. Yeah, but this seems to be too much because white is threatening queen b8 mate. Yeah, so this doesn't really work.
And you can clearly see that Shak is trying to remember what was in the file. I mean, he definitely was looking at something like that. Perhaps not in this particular situation. Perhaps there was an inclusion of a move, a slight difference. For example, he might have seen the position with the pawn not on a2, not the pawn on a3, but on pawn on a2.
And
he's trying to understand. I mean, is this possible or not? And you can see he's not exactly happy. I mean, perhaps I know this feeling actually because.
Yeah, but I was looking at this. I was looking, or I have it in the file, and I checked every single variation, but not this one.
Right. I mean, sometimes it has been that you think that, okay, this move is impossible, and there is something, I'm going to find it, and then your opponent plays exactly this line, and then you start to regret, exactly like you said, why didn't I check it further? It's such a human move, such a normal response. So what was there? So, I mean...
I assume queen d8, he'll have to, since queen d4 seems to be impossible, he will have to settle for this. And... to play some position like white takes on f6, bishop f1, bishop f1, and who knows, maybe rook b1 quickly, or...
But rook b1 is met by takes, and queen c3.
You take on c3.
Yeah, the pawn is falling, unless you can somehow play c2, and then... But I don't believe it. c2 and then rook b1, but that looks really artificial, doesn't it?
Oh, well, c2, queen even G5, though you are threatening.
Queen g5 should end the game after the
G5,
trade.
Queen takes f6.
And rook a2 should end the game.
So this position, trade, rook a2.
At least visually speaking, it looks...
Yeah, it looks hopeless.
Yeah.
Looks hopeless for black.
Unless
really.
black manages to double the rooks on the A file. Rook b1, rook c2, rook a1. I don't know. I mean, this is just a pure fantasy.
To double on first rank. And then that's actually bad for white. Yeah.
No, but you can play rook b2. But I mean, this line is ridiculous. It's probably not going to happen on the board, but something along the lines is definitely Shak thinking
You know
about.
what? This does look like some computer line, rook b2, and then you trade. And then you go here, and if you play bishop c3, it's rook a3, and black actually takes both a-pawns, and if bishop c1, it's rook a1. And who knows, maybe it's just a computer draw.
Well, I don't know. No, it's lost, bishop d2 and a5, no?
Bishop d2 and takes an
unless
a5.
There's even an eternal attack on the bishop, rook a2, rook a1. And
yeah, maybe still, I continue chasing this bishop, this and rook a4, and who knows, maybe white is winning here, maybe not, because rook a1 and the a-pawn is running really quickly. It doesn't seem so. But anyhow, queen d8 seems to be the move to play after e5. Is there any other option for Shak? Seems to be...
I mean, okay, he can also play rook e1. I mean, but rook e1, you need to understand what is happening if... I mean, okay, e4, e5 is still a threat, so probably black cannot play c2. And, I mean...
right.
At least, I think I can see from Shak's face, he is not happy that he did not repeat this line. At least, it looks like that. You can see it. I mean, he is not happy. There was this move. I mean, why didn't I check it?
Yeah, that's really curious. What's going to happen then after c3?
Yeah, I mean, probably e4, e5 is still the main move, so you need to
e5 is very
it.
principled. So once again, what did we say? Queen d8 takes here. Black has to take on f1, bishop f1, and then we were trying to play c2.
But it looks so weird.
Is this absolutely hopeless?
Take.
Takes, queen
And
c3,
it looks
and say
hopeless.
queen f6, yeah?
But it looks hopeless, doesn't
What's
it?
the material?
And Shak has played a move.
Only one pawn, yeah?
Yeah,
he's played a move, and it's e4, e5, of course.
Right. I mean,
It's
obviously you
e4,
cannot
e5.
prepare everything as much as you would want to, and at some moment you have to work on the board. You have to figure out yourself
What's going on?
what's going on, and so
Yeah,
I don't know
for
if Shak
black-
actually remembered it. It didn't seem like he remembered it. It felt like more he was calculating the lines and trying to understand if there is an actual difference between what he knows and what should be played. And I would probably expect for Wesley to respond very quickly, because you don't play c3 without a clear intention what to do after e4,
Yeah,
e5.
absolutely. That's the first question you ask. And even before playing c4, c3, you understand, yeah, e4 is played with intention to win a knight. The poor horsey on f6, yeah, will be attacked with e5.
And queen d4 doesn't work, right? At least
so
we managed to
we couldn't
calculate
really
it.
make it work. Yeah, bishop e3, and honestly, I don't see a move here.
Or unless, of course, black is ready to retreat with the queen and then take on f1 and claim that this is a good position.
Go there. I know, once again, this runs under... That's the problem, so that
But you just
first
play
I
bishop
take
b6.
on b6.
Right.
Doesn't matter where the queen is. I mean, perhaps d8 is the most unlucky square because, bishop c7 comes with a tempo. But even if, say, queen retreats to d7, well, putting the queen on d7 has another drawback that I take here, and there is queen g5 in case of bishop f1. There is queen g5.
Right.
So maybe there is just no good square. And queen g4 we did try. After queen g4, it's bishop takes b6, bishop f1. Bishop to c7, attacking the rook.
Unless this is somehow holding. I mean, okay, still the white king is sort of slightly weak, but still, okay, there's this checkmate idea on the last line.
Yeah, so that was the major problem. Bishop takes g2, bishop takes d8, and from a5 the queen is threatening queen d8 mate on the back rank.
What I'm actually slightly surprised that Wesley hasn't played immediately is that he was apparently facing a choice. I would imagine, I mean, if somebody, for example, I mean, if I was playing black and I would be ready to meet e4, e5, so I played c3 and my opponent plays e5. So if I'm sitting here, it means I had a choice. I mean, I wasn't exactly sure. I could play this or I could play this. So probably he has two continuations which he found to be useful, and right now, since Shak actually played e5, he's still double-checking it. Which is the better move? So,
but honestly, I hardly can think of two continuations.
I don't know, maybe queen d... No, but queen d7
queen
jumps
d7,
under...
yeah, that's the problem. If he plays queen d7, then e takes f6, and queen e is going to be played to g5. Very next move.
Right, so that's...
So it's either queen d4 or queen to d8. And
so
queen
d4
d4 doesn't really work, so queen d8 seems to be by the, the elimination method.
Are we missing something here? I'm not sure. I do not really understand it. Unless there is some spectacular queen sacrifice, for example, as Wesley saw yesterday, he played against Sergei Koryakin. Okay, it was a blitz game after all, but he blundered the move knight e5 by Sergei Koryakin, which probably was part of the home preparation, and then Wesley found a spectacular queen sacrifice on the board, but let's not be fooled, it was a blitz game after all. And in the blitz game, it's so much easier to play out a practical position, although it's probably lost. Here it's a different thing. This is a classical game. Both of the opponents have a lot of time to think about, so I don't know. I mean, something must have been, or perhaps Wesley is having second thoughts. I don't know, really. So perhaps he found something which I cannot really imagine. It's very, very difficult to tell, to be honest. So I would still expect queen d8. And what happens after queen d8? Probably one of the lines we were looking at. It's always very difficult to assume that one of the opponents has actually blundered, because at that level, usually you do not expect that your opponent is going to blunder, and neither are we commentators here in the studio. We are not expecting that one of the opponents is going to be blundering. And yeah, and Shak actually looks very confident right now. He's walking on the stage, checking his lines, and I think his confidence actually grows by the second. As his opponent is not making a move. After e4, e5, you would expect your opponent would reply something very quickly, and you're always not exactly 100% sure. Is your calculation correct? But since Wesley is taking so much time, and he did play queen d8 in the end, you start to gain even more confidence. Right, and we have Yannick also here in the studio. What do you think, Yannick? What happened here in this game?
First of all, hello everybody, and hello others. Well, I also got confused when I saw c3, because, first reaction, what happens after e5? Okay, queen takes d4, but then bishop e3, and it doesn't
that should
look
be
good,
simple.
So he went to d8, and I don't know, it looks like it's pretty bad for Wesley.
Unless there's some immediate tactics, we're trying to work out these lines. For example, e takes on f6.
Yep.
And I would imagine something like that is gonna happen. And yeah, bishop f1 makes sense to be played. Bishop f1 and something along the lines of c2. At least we try to make it happen. Otherwise, nothing really makes sense here. And what I was suggesting, I'm not sure if this is actually queen g5 looks like artificial move trying to force the queen exchange.
And maybe it's not so bad, yeah? Queen g5.
I don't know. We did not really pay so much attention, so this was one of the silly lines we're actually looking at. Takes, rook a2, rook b1. Well, it looks lost, but it's not so easy. Rook takes on c2, rook a1. And presumably the rooks come to b1, and rook b2 feels like a forced move, unless I'm missing something here.
Yeah, rook a1.
Maybe I'm missing something. Rook b2 takes, and there's some sort of eternal attack on the a file.
That could be something, yeah. And if I do it without the exchange of queens, where was I?
I don't know. Okay, queen g5 definitely is not a mandatory move. That was like my immediate solution, which I sort of saw automatically. Yeah, probably rook a2 ends the game. I do not believe this position, to be honest, because queen g5 is a threat always there.
Yeah.
So what do you do if you're Wesley So?
I scratch my head.
Right. Yeah, that was slightly strange.
What I don't quite understand is what he saw here, because e5, he cannot have overlooked e5. After e4, it's obvious, so he has to, to have seen it.
Could it be that he blundered something?
He probably blundered something, but
yes, but what exactly?
What did he blunder?
What did he? It cannot be that he was ready to meet e5 with queen takes on d4. It cannot be, right? So here we had this idea that after c3 supposedly looks bad, which was our initial impression, that after, let's say here, if black does play c2, which actually happened in the game, white plays e5, queen takes on d4, and we saw sort of like automatically bishop e3. That's the most sensible move here. Sort of like important intermezzo. And yeah, it's really surprising, and we have a couple of moves in the game. So bishop f1 has been played on the board, and I would imagine something like c2 here. What else? Okay, technically there's also a move like queen takes on d4, which is something we did not have a look at, but queen takes on d4, you just play something as simple as bishop e3, no?
Bishop e3.
And queen f6 and rook c1, and
I can take on b6 as well.
Right.
I guess.
Wow. Yeah, right. You just take even on b6. This is surprise.
And if he takes on f6, then maybe he can take on f6.
You just take on c3, no?
Just take on
That's
c3.
At that level, that should be easy technique. Okay, at least materially wise, it's about almost equal. It's okay, two pieces for
but the
rook,
two bishops are
but
strong.
Two bishops, it's too much.
They're going to be very strong. And rooks need, they have this open file, but no real target then in the white position. Bishop e3, rook c1, everything is quite natural. And then c6 will fall, certainly, and so it doesn't look too good for Wesley.
It looks like a complete disaster, to be honest. There must be something we were missing here. Wesley is almost 2,800 caliber player. I mean, okay, it happens sometimes that even as, for such a great player, there is a bad day in the office, and you make these incredible, crazy moves. But
it can happen, yeah.
Yeah, it can definitely happen. But at such an important moment, it just throws away the game without even starting it. I mean, Mamedyarov played the novelty A3 just a couple of moves ago.
All right. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, we also did not know it instantly. I checked the database, and it appears to be at least a novelty with an interesting idea to activate the bishop on bishop d2, bishop b4, or so at least we thought. And this is like unexpected collapse so quickly.
It's absolutely true, yeah. And well, yeah, Wesley So, who is usually so solid, and
but I mean, this whole line is so tricky. I mean, I've always liked it. I do not understand why. I mean, perhaps there is an immediate way how Black can try to equalize it, but I always thought this whole line of knight a3, bishop takes on a3, and b takes on a3 is extremely tricky. Black needs to be very, very accurate to actually equalize the game. So,
well, it's actually a good opening choice by Mamedyarov, I say.
Definitely,
because he does create some tension. He does create some play. It's not like the game fizzles out in some sort of equality without any resources. And here, well, there is food for fight, let's say, and that's exactly the kind of Mamedyarov we like to see, and who has been performing so well in the past year until he won Biel and a few other top events. He jumped up to 28. Was it
22 or 30 even, something, I don't know. I mean, so, 2017, I believe it was it?
Yeah, maybe. And, well, now he's back together with the others, let's say.
Other mortals?
Other mortals, strong mortals, but still. And but he can still show some strong play, and this preparation is quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you can see C2 definitely is the best try. I would imagine try to do something here, but even, I mean, okay, Queen G5 is even not necessary. You just play Rook A2 and that's it. I mean, what do you do here? At this level, it's as good as resignation. No, that's not the position. That's one of the analysis.
No, that's what we went.
Yeah, and we are looking at this position, and I was suggesting this Queen G5, but I mean, Queen G5 is not even needed. Queen G5 was just forcing a line and forcing for Black to take Queen takes on F6 and then Rook A2. But the question is, what's wrong with Rook A2? Yeah,
Rook A2, and I think for White it's quite important to keep at least one of the two heavy pieces he has, Queen or Rook, together with the two bishops. Otherwise, this Black Rook, as we saw in that line where we played Rook G5, and there you found Rook A1, with the idea of Rook BB1, and then Rook B2 seems to be forced, but here it looks like White has already lost some of its, or maybe even all his advantage, possibly.
I mean, definitely White should be better, but perhaps not even winning.
So probably the best move is to play Rook A2.
After Rook A2, I just don't see what to do for Black. I mean, you can try to take as many pawns, but they are doubled. And actually, I was speaking also with Yevgeny in the studio, and one of the reasons why I was saying that this is a great line for White, this causes a great unorthodox position where Black has a lot of doubled and ruined pawn structure. So if Black misplays something, so at some moment White might just end up in a strategically winning position, because those pawns, they just start to fall. And I did not really expect this is going to happen in this game, but something like it is actually going on here after this very strange.
And he's done it.
So it would seem a blunder. Rook A2, it's like a...
He's done it, yeah. I'm very curious to see how it's going to unfold. But it could also be that this game is going to be over within 5 moves. It's very much possible.
Perhaps even earlier than that. I mean, how do you play this position? You must be really disgusted with yourself inside, because at that level, make such a move. I mean, you must be really hard on yourself. How did you do this? And
well, that's going to be one of the questions I will ask to Wesley So after the game, and we will see.
So something definitely was missed.
For sure. It seems, I mean, you don't go into this, willingly. You don't want to have something like this, clearly. So, certainly he missed something.
Yeah, so a very unfortunate day for Wesley. So a very bad start of the semi-finals. On the other hand, it's an amazing start for Shahryar. I mean, to score... okay, the game is still going on, but I would imagine it's going to end with an easy win for Shahryar, a very important win because this is a very short match, only 2 games. And a tough spot for the American to play from this moment.
Definitely, yeah. Well, for tomorrow it would be, I mean, if he loses, which we think he will, but if he loses, then tomorrow, well, it's an all or nothing situation for him. And in a way, you feel a bit lighter, so that you can try anything and everything, but it's not the best situation to find yourself in, for sure.
Right, so we probably should switch to the other game between Alexander Grishuk and Maxim Vachier-Lagrave.
In that Berlin. Yeah, Maxim is quite a specialist in those Berlin endgames, and from time to time he wins one, and then come a few draws, and then he wins again, and he basically plays on statistics. He believes white is very slightly better. Black needs to perform some sort of memory exercise to remember all of the little lines, and I don't know if you followed, for instance, his game against Nakamura from the Abidjan Grand Chess Tour Rapid, and he just get that preparation in, and Nakamura didn't know or didn't remember, and he got an almost winning endgame from that. He almost spoiled it, but in the end he won eventually. And that's not so... Well, that's a very pragmatic approach for white. He knows he's not going to lose, and from time to time he wins one.
Yeah, but so far, I mean, Maxim has never won a single classical game against Alexander Grishuk, so, I mean, who knows? Perhaps today is going to be the day, but, I mean, at the moment, black looks extremely solid.
Yeah, he does, yeah. And Grishuk, he knows what he's doing in those Berlin. It's not the only opening he plays against E4, but it's definitely the solid choice for him. And, I don't really expect him to lose. I think this match will, I don't want to anticipate, but I think we're going to have a tie-break in this match. Right. I'm not saying these 2 games will be dull and quick draws, but they are so close to each other that it's very likely they will neutralize each other in the 2 rapid games.
Well, thank you, Yannick, for joining us in the studio, and I hope we'll see you here anytime soon.
Yes, probably.
Yeah, and we'll have Yevgeny soon back in the studio, and the game between Shahryar Mamedyarov and Wesley So is still continuing, and well, I would imagine Wesley just doesn't want to resign so quickly, so he is still seeking for some practical ways to continue, but I mean, you can see, well, obviously, I mean, he's not happy what's going on here, and trying to understand how did this happen. But I mean, even such blackouts are possible for the best players in the world. Most notably is probably how Vladimir Kramnik once blundered a mate in one move, and there have been a number of occasions when top grandmasters have blundered a piece in one move. So definitely this is a game probably Wesley So is gonna wish to forget very, very quickly if he wants to proceed in this tournament and try to get at least to the finals. So starting this mini match with a loss, it's not nice, but okay, I mean, still he has 1 game to go. We assume white is going to win this game very quickly, so he will have his chance to strike back in tomorrow's game.
Yeah, right, and I'm back to the studio, and I have to say, just for, well, we never mentioned it today, and I believe we forgot to mention it tomorrow. Yesterday, I'm confusing, yesterday, tomorrow, sorry. So, essentially what I'm trying to say, we are not using the computer analysis, typically. But now, during the break, just for clarity's sake, I check what is the evaluation in Mamedyarov versus Wesley So position. And the computer says +3.5. plus
Oh, right.
3.5. So there is no confusion. We were right. White is completely winning. C3 was a mistake, and C2 was even another mistake. So after C3, it's already a big plus for white, and C2 was another bad move after rook A2. So let me bring this position on the board. This is completely winning for white. And yeah, it's sort of mysterious what has happened to Wesley So, because he entered this position, well, easily.
This must be a hallucination. I mean, nothing else. I mean, sometimes the mind plays the tricks with your head and you notice things which shouldn't be there. So, I don't know. I mean, we are going to find it out in the interview, right? I mean, you can see Wesley definitely has accepted the fate. He knows the game is not going to end well for him. So probably out of some principle, he's going to make a couple of moves and then he's just going to resign.
Yeah. So C takes, rook takes C2, G F6. Well, you know, I'm not sure about only a couple of moves, because yes, the position is lost, but still white will have to demonstrate some technique at least. It's not like winning automatically. White doesn't have the passed pawn, which is promoting, yeah? So white will still have to prove something.
Well, I would imagine still at that level, that should be easy technique. You can just grab the pawn on c7, and everything that white needs to make sure is not to blunder anything at all. So
yeah, so rook takes.
Rook takes, and black would be happy to exchange the rooks, I would imagine, even though perhaps even that position is easily winning for white. So
yeah, that's what that's what I thought, like rook b7, and then it is counterintuitive to take, but on the other hand, what happens if I take, and I'm not sure how to start this, but essentially what I want is bishop d2 to go to b4,
right.
Put the pawn on a5, go to c5, put the pawn on a6, so those pawns are moving, and well, the passed pawn in the center that black can create, let's say, this way, should be not so hard to block. I'm not sure if white has to take on e5 or not, but this looks just winning. Bishop to d3, king comes to f1, e2, shouldn't be a problem. And look, in this particular case, all black pawns are isolated. So once again, it's a bit ironic. He had a tripled pawn on c file, and now he has a double pawn on d file.
Right. And the situation wouldn't be as bad for black if he had, for example, rook against, let's say, bishop and the knight, because that might be a standard occasion and not necessarily always the stronger side with the two light pieces wins against the rook. But those two bishops, there is this notorious saying, I mean, two bishops are so powerful, and very often a single rook is just powerless. I mean, the bishops pretty much combined together, they control half of the board, and one rook, it's very difficult for the defending side to come up and try to save the game.
Well, and yeah, once again, so it seems you can trade the rooks, but on the other hand, if you think of it like this, so I have two bishops which will restrict a lot of, precisely as you've mentioned, like restrict the rook's possibilities. That why don't I keep both black rooks on the board? It's not about my white rook, but about both black rooks on the board. So both rooks will have it, will find it difficult to find any use, right? So I'm thinking rook c5. If I'm allowed, I'm putting the bishop on h6, so there will be some back rank issues, right? Bishop b5 is the idea, to just shut down both black rooks unless black wants to play a6. Yeah, seems to be completely winning.
What do you think Alexander Grishik is thinking right now? He was looking at the board, probably in total disbelief. How did this happen?
Well, he's thinking, how do you beat Wesley so quickly?
Right.
Wesley is known to be a very, very solid player, right? So Grishik perhaps was surprised.
Right. I mean, he definitely was surprised. So, yeah, you might be right. I mean, Wesley probably will try to keep the game going, at least for some time, because you don't want just to resign as quickly
I mean,
right after the opening.
But still, yeah, if we are, let's say, if we are fair, rook a2, move 19, white is winning. That's an opening catastrophe in a way, right?
Right.
So really, really surprising. And now it is sort of getting the explanation. The way Mamedyarov spent on 15 minutes on e4, e5, because he didn't expect black's move to be so bad. You're surprised. Yeah, I mean, I'm winning. Yeah, I'm winning after e5. What's going on? I'm winning.
Well, definitely he did not check it in his analysis. I mean, because there was no such a move.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, yes, from human perspective, now that we have this position on the board, or we rather had this position on the board, you're kind of curious what happens after c3. But when you analyze with the computer and you look at top 3, top 5 lines sometime, and if this move is not there, you might just not check it, because, yeah, it's...
I'm imagining, I don't know what was going on in Wesley's mind, but probably after this e5 and queen takes on d4, could it be that he simply blundered bishop e3?
Yeah, perhaps the whole
just
point
unbelievable.
was... Yeah, okay, let's try to make it work without bishop e3. For instance, we take on f6, black captures on f1. And now it is different, it seems. Yeah,
because
bishop f1, c2,
or even c2, right?
Yeah, c2 attacking the rook on a1, and who knows? Maybe it's black who has the upper hand. Yeah?
Or perhaps even rook b1 immediately.
Or rook b1. Yeah. Well, why would I need c2? Yeah, exactly. Rook b1 immediately, threatening to swap the rooks. Both bishops pinned. Who knows what's that?
Right, so he must, but this is so strange. I mean, to miss bishop e3, maybe there's a different explanation, but it only proves one thing. Wesley So is a human being. I mean,
yeah,
he just makes mistakes just as we do. He does it a lot less than we do, but he is still a human. So there is a hope for the humanity.
Yeah, rook to b7, rook c5. And yeah, speaking of Wesley So being a human, I believe he said it himself in the interview after Croatia, where he was placed second after Magnus Carlsen. He says, I just feel like I won a tournament. Yes, well, we have one guy in our chess community who is under some suspicion. Now, obviously, I'm not talking cheating, but that he's kind of not from this planet. That's obviously Magnus Carlsen. With his recent results, that's absolutely amazing.
What, has he won 8 tournaments in a row?
Yeah, well, that's what they claim. So starting from last year's World Blitz Championship in St. Petersburg, he won 8 tournaments in a row, and more than that, any single tournament he has taken part in.
Right. I mean, this is an unbelievable performance. So at the chess world, everybody is wondering, can he be the only player in the history to reach the 2,900 mark? Well, who knows? So you can definitely imagine Wesley saying that he feels like he won the tournament by finishing second place, clear second place after such a monster in the first place. Yeah. Definitely. It feels like a big achievement.
So king g7, king g2, rook goes to b1.
Well, the only chance is to double the rooks on the first rank and try to catch white off guard, but I do not see it happening.
Hard to see what. Well, by the way, can I just put the bishop to b5? Then
I think so.
Bishop e3. You know,
maybe even bishop a6 is. I don't know. Is it needed or not? Maybe it's not even needed.
You have a lot of. Yeah, it's like I thought maybe I want to prevent this rook from entering to b3, and then it could be a bit like awkward, so that the bishop from c1 is not moving. So for the time being, maybe bishop b5. On the other hand, you have a lot of time. I mean, Mamedyarov has a lot of time. 1 hour 18 minutes. Imagine you spent 12 minutes and you are winning against Wesley So. That sounds very good.
That is not going to happen anytime soon again.
Yeah,
definitely.
Spent 12 minutes.
Yeah, bishop b5 feels like it was played.
It happened yesterday, but it was rapid. Oh no, it was the blitz game. Yeah, when Wesley So got, let's say, a lost position from the opening. Yeah, so bishop b5 is actually on the board.
Perhaps
so restricting this rook's activity.
I was wondering what is Grishik doing there. Perhaps he is double checking. Am I calculating the count of pieces correct? I mean, there must be a piece for black hidden somewhere. I mean, a knight somewhere. I don't know. I don't understand. How is this possible? That I mean, why did just win?
Is it the right position? And if so, why the game is still on? Right. Something like that might be going through Grishik's head.
But jokes aside, I mean, everybody is surprised, including Mamedyarov himself. I mean, you do not expect this.
One of the ideas in this position, again, now it's, of course, it's not needed by any means, but one of the ideas in this position, the king from g2 goes to c2 and traps the rook on b1, because it can be placed on b3 or b1. It doesn't have any other squares. So
Right.
as funny as that, it might be the case that at some moment black will have to play a6 to get rid of the pawn just to free the rook. Well, maybe rook b6 is possible, in fact. Rook b6 follow up with a7, a6. That's a possibility. But after rook b6, you can play bishop f4, intended to play bishop c7 if a6 happens. So I believe this rook simply never comes back into business.
Well, probably he has to do something. He has to give up the a-pawn and somehow try to activate his rooks. Rook b6, bishop f4, a6, I would imagine.
Yeah, a6,
bishop c7,
goes there, rook b7,
take, and rook b2.
takes, rook b2, trying to attack f2, but once again, the feeling is like the amount of counterplay black can generate is very limited, right? So
Right.
if I just go back or maybe just push the pawn when black is ready to double, I do something like that. Rook
That's
b2,
probably too much, no?
Bishop g3.
Bishop
g3,
right.
yeah. g4, bishop g3 to guard the f2 pawn, then move the other bishop.
But
go
okay,
to
now at least black has some counterplay.
yeah,
you can
black
take rook
starts
takes on a3.
taking, and maybe we'll try to drag it to some position with, say, an extra piece. No, extra piece should win easily here. I mean, there are some positions, like let's say I give the exchange for one of the bishops and the a-pawn, and if there is, let's say, if I manage to grab one more pawn on the king side, it might be not that easy to win. But obviously the current position on the board, which is the position after Mamedyarov has played bishop to b5, is absolutely winning.
Well, stranger things have happened in chess history. So there have been some situations when the losing side has managed to escape a completely lost position with being down a lot of material. Is it going to happen today? I do not think so, but there's always this very slight chance.
Yeah, well, somehow Mamedyarov seems to be a wrong guy to, to hope for him to not to win, because he's type of calculating endgame player.
Right.
And yeah, in this kind of position, at some point he will be able to calculate. I just move my a-pawn, I grab a7, I win. So it's not about, this like long dragging technique. It's just that, very straightforward it should be.
Yeah, and if he was down on time, let's say 1 minute perhaps, then he might miss something. But here, 1 hour and about 50 minutes on the clock. No, there's no doubt.
Well, incredibly comfortable situation for Mamedyarov.
So probably we should switch back to the other semifinal.
Yeah, Vyshyalykrov Grishuk, and here players consume quite a lot of time. Well, players being Alexander Grishuk. Maxim is actually on comfortable 1 hour 15 or something. Yeah, but Grishuk has spent, remember, bishop d7, 10 minutes. Bishop d2, king c8, another 12 minutes. After bishop c3, rook e8 was played pretty fast. Rook a to d1, g6, another 16 minutes gone.
G6, I think it's an important move to include. Otherwise, black needs to understand at which moment is white going to play e6.
Yeah, which moment e6 becomes annoying. And now that I've mentioned sometimes the potential endgame when knight gets to f6 and getting exchanged might be dangerous for black. But first question is, how do you get the knight on? How do you get the knight on f6? Because it has to be via e4. So far, knight g3 is not possible because black will simply take it. Realistically, g4, f4 is not there just yet, right?
Yeah, but this looks strange, the way Maxim played it right now to play g4. Well, okay, probably he should do something, but...
Apparently not g4, right? And black...
Although g4 probably is met be immediately by h7, h5, and you can no longer
that's the
play
problem. That's
g5.
the problem. h5, and you can't play g5. You can't. Well, maybe you can play some rook d4, but that's extremely awkward.
Right.
And otherwise, you seemingly have no way to guard the g4 pawn. And then this kind of exchange. Oh well, maybe this is playable. Takes and knight f4. So the question is, of course, if black recaptures on h5 or tries to take on h3, but taking on h3 might be a bit too much.
Well, something along the lines of moving the kingside pawns, because I just don't see anything else for white. So perhaps you actually mentioned before that white might start with the actual move g3, which might be more careful.
G3, drive the bishop away. Let's say bishop goes to e7, I don't know.
Yeah.
And king g2.
And now probably black will play h5 and try to blockade the
probably
pawn.
black has to play h5 because, let's say, in case of c5, it is already g4. In case of h5, white is just in time to go king g3. Again, not claiming that this is like too much of an achievement for white, but at least white is getting somewhere.
Right.
Maxime has played knight f4 after g6. Wait a sec, where is it?
It's the 17th
yeah,
move.
and
yes.
knight f4.
Knight f4 might have been some kind of a preparation move, because definitely white is going to play at the king side. I mean, there's nothing to do at the queen side. Everything is blocked, and only black can be playing at the queen side, so you have to move forward the pawns. Either it is e5, e6 something at some point, or you just have to move forward the pawns. Is it g3, g4? I don't know.
Yeah, well, the other thing about knight f4 that it sort of stops, maybe not stops really, but in case of c5, you have to watch out for knight d5, right?
Right. So probably something like b6 makes sense here, because you want to play b6, c5, presumably at some moment anyway, which is the standard setup for black in the Berlin system, and b6 looks just like a good move. I mean, and it doesn't really allow for white to take control of the d5 square immediately. And I would imagine for white, you have to move the g-pawn, I don't know, g3 or g4, and push forward the pawns.
I was debating, in fact, should black play h5 somewhere, because an immediate h5 might be, once again, there are positions where h5 is awkward because of e6. And bishop takes, knight takes, you have to take with the... no, maybe you can take with the pawn. But let's say something like this happens, and it really depends how fast black is playing b6, king b7, because white starts with g4, puts the knight on bishop on e5, so that after b6, king b7, there is rook d7. So those positions, despite the fact that black is a pawn up, might be a bit dangerous for black. But if I don't want this, then it seems that I have bishop g5 first, driving the knight to d3, seems the only square.
Well, technically e6 is also possible, isn't it?
E6 here, right. But with the pawn on h7, it's different. It's different because it seems that I can take with the pawn, and the bishop is not impressive just yet, but probably will.
Well, also this is possible to test it, something like knight d3, knight e5.
Knight d3, put the knight on e5,
Not clear.
Now that I'm looking at it, maybe Krzysztof has to pay a bit more attention to this e5, e6 move, and somehow he cannot really stop it. Bishop e6 would be what white is looking for. Well, then, of course,
he wants to play bishop g5 by the looks of it. I mean, he is looking at the line, you were mentioning it.
Yeah, he was approaching the bishop on h4 at least.
He's not going to put it on e7 most likely, so not on d8 definitely, so bishop g5 is the best choice. I mean, the best logical choice, I would imagine.
Wait a sec, bishop e7 might make some sense, because after e6, take, knight takes, there is bishop b4. And then...
Well, but then you would need to understand what's going on after knight g5.
Knight g5, and yes, black can take, pawn takes.
Not clear.
That's not clear at all,
A very big committal decision.
But he has played bishop g5 already.
Yeah, bishop g5, I think, makes most sense. And actually, the question is, what if now white actually tries this e6? Because, I mean, okay, obviously, I mean, e6 is not a mandatory move. I mean, he can play something like knight d3.
Knight
so
d3
what about e6? Well, can we try to make it happen? So
E6.
I think bishop e6 must be the
Maybe
move.
bishop e6 after all,
Knight e6,
takes.
rook takes. No? Or is it?
Probably we do take.
Probably, with the rook.
Rook takes, pawn takes, and some bishop e5, for instance.
Yeah, now try to claim that you have some sort of a game going on at the king side.
But bishop e5, there is a4, rook a5, rook d5, It's still very tricky because, I mean, at least with pawn on h5, I'm starting quickly to
E6 is on the board.
E6 is on the board.
It's amazing.
E6
It's a great
is on
idea.
the board.
So you can see Alexander definitely was ready for this. So when he was playing bishop g5, he was already anticipating e6.
Yeah, and bishop takes indeed.
That's really a great pawn sacrifice. Not that it's exactly a new idea, but it can be met, so it can be really poisonous. So Maxime definitely is still playing for the win here. He is not going to settle for immediate draw.
Rook takes, pawn takes. Perhaps it makes sense to play a4.
A4.
Well, in this case, of course, black goes b5 and starts opening the files, but I just don't like the idea that black is playing a4, and whenever you move the bishop, he will bring the rook via a5 to d5.
Right.
Because otherwise, what do you do otherwise? I'm not
so sure that this a4 rook a5 is actually such a big deal. For example, let's say we try bishop e5, a4, and now I play c4.
C4.
I'm not sure. What is this?
So that rook a5.
Or perhaps I play c4 afterwards. For example, I just start with something like, instead of the c4, I start with f4, which is met by bishop e7 most likely. King f2, I would imagine.
F2,
yeah, rook a5 and now c4.
Now c4.
And what is this?
Yeah, there is still some problem in bringing the rook into the game.
But to be honest, I don't believe in this position. I just cannot imagine that White is going to organize something.
You have to play b3, right? Takes, rook back. After all, it's like one weakness, but black is a pawn up. Yeah, well, this pawn is not yet so significant, but why black has to be worse, it's not clear, right? I mean, just like for the illustration's sake, I go here, rook d3, and I play bishop d6, for instance. Should be more than fine for black.
Well, what else can white do?
We shall see. So far, the rook on e6 is not yet taken. Could it be that there is an alternative to...
No, I don't think there is an alternative. Perhaps Maxime did not expect rook takes on e6 actually to be played. So
or this sequence of moves, because yeah, it could be that he was... Remember my first reaction, I said, yeah, I want to keep two bishops to take with the pawn, which probably was a bit annoying after knight d3 and then knight c5 or e5. Yeah, so maybe he didn't really pay close attention to bishop takes followed by rook takes. And then when bishop e6 is on the board, you understand. I mean, even if it's a surprising move, you have to take the bishop. You are not playing knight d3 here in this position, and perhaps here, for some reason, he decided to...
So the only other idea I can come up for white, you want to activate your rook somehow at the king side. So, I mean, obviously the rooks go off. Yeah,
you take on e6 no matter what.
And now you try...
And some rook d3, eh?
Right, I mean rook d3, rook f3, rook f7. So what about that? It also comes with some ideas. I don't know if it's needed or not. h4, bishop h4, rook h3, I target the pawn on h7, or h4, h5, and I create some kind of a weakness at the king side.
Yeah, this actually, you know, this looks much more convincing, to be honest, because at least in this case, I don't see how white might end up being worse. Right, so rook f3, rook f7, if this happens, that it's clearly in white's favor. b5 maybe?
Yeah, probably. I mean, black needs to activate the king. King b7, rook
f7, rook f7.
And now black needs to activate his rook, but then again, bishop e5 is an annoying threat to reckon with.
Yeah, a5 is hanging as well.
And a5 is hanging as well. Well, this looks really...
Yeah, this
isn't
pleasant. Yeah, this isn't pleasant.
So perhaps that is the point. I mean, Maxime was actually expecting... Why he is actually sitting, he was expecting f takes on e6, I would imagine.
Maybe he was expecting indeed pawn takes, so that black keeps one of the keeps this rook, and maybe at some point would go rook e7 just to guard the 7th rank.
Right.
Like for instance, in the same variation, rook here. Not that I can see how to do it. Rook e7 here. But then the bishop is kind of awkward.
Yeah, and also you need to understand what is going on after g3, h4 idea. The bishop is going to feel sort of awkward, and rook takes on e6 is on the board. So I would imagine something like that is going to happen, or perhaps also bishop e5 and f4. But now that I look, rook d3, rook f3...
Rook d3 looks much more promising.
Looks very, very direct.
We keep the bishop to control the a5 square once again. So rook d3, rook f3, rook f7. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. What to do? So perhaps something like bishop I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was
E7
looking at.
maybe.
Bishop e7, rook f3.
And now activate the king. King
the
d7.
problem with king d7 is rook f7 targeting the pawn and threatening bishop f6. Or maybe not. This, bishop f6, rook e8. How good or how bad is this?
Rook g7, you can
rook
always
g7,
go for the
you
rook endgame.
collect on e7, take on g6, white is
White is better, but not winning.
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, how realistic white chances are. But it doesn't look the safest way for black, right? So in the current position, black is the pawn up, so maybe there is the way to, to just somehow return the pawn under more favorable circumstances. Okay, so one more time. If I do this,
rook f3,
this, and rook to d8. Yeah, intentionally played b6 so that a5 is protected.
Right, so bishop e5 makes more sense, I believe.
Bishop e5, yeah, but then I was hoping for a check and bishop d8, and when the rook takes on h7, black
rook
starts
d2.
himself, playing rook d2 and chase white's pawn, so it might turn into some sort of a race.
Well, this actually looks reasonable, so I would expect something like that to happen. Are we missing something here? For example,
like rook d8, and it could be that white. White has this move if he wants it. f4, and then the bishop is forced to.
Well, that looks very powerful.
Yeah, if f4 is annoying, because you're probably forced to go there, and then wait a sec. On the other hand, bishop g3. Oops, no, not g3 is not possible.
So what about king f1, rook d1, king e2, rook g... Okay, but black is organizing some sort of a counterplay. So.
Yeah, he's still, attacking one of the pawns. Yeah, maybe that's the way for black. Even though the path seems to be quite narrow in reality. At first it looked like, okay, how bad can it be?
Look,
I'm a pawn up, yeah?
I just had a glimpse on Grishik's face. He did not look happy.
Yeah.
He was sort of like shaking his head. So it might be that he just missed it. He was probably expecting the idea which we were talking previously, this bishop e5 and f4, and then he thought that his rook comes into play, and this is why he automatically sweat. You can yet again see, so Grishik is not happy. It doesn't look like he was actually expecting this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's yet again in disbelief. How did I miss this? Unless he is playing some theatrics, which I don't believe. I mean, Maxime is not sitting on the board right now, so there's nobody,
nobody to
show
fool
the
around
acting,
with, yeah.
Right? I mean, so it's only all about himself right now, and yeah, but what to do? So,
well, the other possible idea is to do this: rook f3. Put the king on d7. After this check, put the king on c6. So if black collects h7 to push those pawns and pretend that we have like real counterplay, which I don't know if we have.
It looks worse after bishop e5 and still
bishop
the same
e5,
idea.
And you'll have to play bishop d8.
That's
the
an ugly
is
move,
still
right?
Kind of caged, yeah, and the h pawn will run very quickly. I mean,
right.
White perhaps has a chance to go rook h6 and collect more pawns, but h4 followed by g4 followed by h5 looks very, very scary.
Well, obviously, the best defense, usually there are, of course, exceptions, is to go for active defense. So you want to play as actively as you can, and you want to activate your pieces. So white needs to spend some time, try to I mean, not only to try, but actually to take the pawn on h7. So this gives black some actual time to do something. So he can activate his rooks in a few ways. He can do it through the queen side, perhaps. Some ideas as, I don't know, I mean, a4. Yeah, but it's not clear what it's doing
once
there,
again,
actually.
a4.
I mean, a4, a3. Yeah, but still, rook f3 is a threat.
I would like to
maybe
like
a4,
the
rook
square on
f3, and
a5.
b5.
Yeah, if we, let's say, if we would know that white replies with a3, then of course we are very happy. So the main question is like what happens after rook f3, which, by the way, possibly is threatening rook f8 in some cases.
I mean, okay, a4 is a ridiculous idea. I just wanted somehow to suggest a way for black to activate his pieces. So, and then potentially with the rook come on d1, a1.
Yeah, somehow to get to a2.
Probably no way.
Maybe too slow. Yeah.
But what was so wrong with the idea which you were coming previously? You had this idea to protect the pawn on a5 and to play
b6, rook to f3, king b7, and if rook b7, we were playing rook d8.
I mean, this makes sense. I mean, I would probably calculate this before, but
still, I mean, if I just take, if I don't try any f4s, but just take it, check here and rook c1, or
but what? Ah, right.
Maybe rook c1.
But what about? But it's gonna involve a race. Bishop. I mean, okay. Bishop d1, king h2, and rook c1. I was thinking about bishop f4 and bishop d6 because I limit white's options.
Yes.
To activate the bishop, and then I want to
attack f2, maybe.
To attack, no, c2 and b5, b4, a4, do something there.
Maybe.
I don't know, is this actually working?
But still, again, yeah, like if
this
white,
is a race.
If white goes just to collect the other one.
You're right.
It's hard to, very hard to comprehend. Honestly, I'm not even convinced that this is bad, because you might have like this move. You attack f2, you have bishop c5 at some point ready.
Yeah, but the h-pawn runs forward very quickly, doesn't it?
You just forget about the f2 pawn, you just go, yeah?
It feels bad, I don't know.
Yeah, h4, h5, and at some point it will be really, perhaps impossible to stop this thing.
Right, so what to do?
So that's really the moment where Krysiuk has to, well, this is the moment where Krysiuk has to calculate all the possible options for the counterplay and come up with the best option possible.
So I think it's safe to assume that rook d3 was missed by Alexander Krysiuk. He imagined that white is going to play bishop e5, f4, and he was quite confident he is going to hold this position. So rook d3, rook f3 is an unpleasant move to meet, and right now he is trying to understand how to pose the most practical problems for white and get out of these unpleasantries.
Yeah, I found the resource. I mean, if you promise me that rook goes to f3, I go king d7.
It, really.
I go king d7, rook f3, king e8, and I hold the f7 square.
Right.
Yeah, but with all seriousness, it's not so easy to find a way that you are sure black will make a draw, right? We found a couple of ways where black seemingly has counterplay, maybe survives, maybe doesn't. But
I have another idea, but it doesn't work already. I have to admit. So let's return to the bishop e7, rook f3, king d7, rook f7, king e8, rook h7. Rook d8, and now I want to demonstrate you how black loses a pawn after rook h8, rook d8, and bishop takes on
e5.
Yeah, and that unfortunately doesn't work.
And this shouldn't work as well because of bishop g7, yeah?
It's not a great...
Exchange everything on f8.
Yeah, it's not a great way to find out, is this pawn endgame losing or not, right?
Well, probably it is, because
is.
you don't have the chance to create a passed pawn yourself, and white will just march with his pawns. Mamedov and Wesley Saw played quite a few moves more. Let's check if Mamedov's position is still as winning as we were describing it. Mamedov comes up with a very funny way to, you know, I'm not sure if it was needed, but...
Does he want to checkmate Wesley? I think the idea is to play king h5, bishop
Yeah.
h6, and
So
rook
bishop
c8
e5,
checkmate.
rook to a1 was played, rook c3, and then bishop f4, king f3, bishop e3 to guard the d4 pawn, rook b1, king g4. Yeah, is he really going to play king h5? And bishop h6 and rook c8? That's funny. Because in case of king g6, what happens?
So
There
probably
is rook c8, in fact. f5 check,
checkmate
king
threat
h4.
in one move, rook g8.
Yeah, but still, I mean, somehow he's getting to this king. You go f6, it's bishop e8, and king h5. You know, one doesn't need to win it in the endgame, right? I mean, if he can checkmate his opponent, even though here it's apparently rook b8. I come back on 7th rank, and then bishop back to b5. It could be that this is a start of an attack. That's one of the ways you win with actual material. You just create an attack because you simply have more pieces, right?
Well, that's one way to win the game. There is no harm for white, at least, to try this idea. I mean, he can play it for as long as he wants.
Yeah, black seemingly has no antidote to this whatsoever. So
Yeah, so Wesley at least is not going to resign anytime soon, opposed to what I was expecting. So he still wants to try to make something happen in this game, and although the chances are very slim.
yeah, absolutely. How lost is this position? Well, in fact, king h5 is still possible, right? Because I was thinking of that, like rook b3 takes,
Bishop b5.
bishop b5, rook a3, right? I mean, it has to be lost. It's equal number of pawns, 2 bishops against the rook, and a very strong passed pawn on a file.
I think you just put the king back on something like
you
e2,
return-
bishop f4, bishop c7, bishop b6, and then the a pawn just marches forward.
Yeah, right. So you put the bishops like that, and then the pawn goes all the way to a7. Yeah.
I think what Wesley is going to do, he's just going to sit passively. Because he has no way to improve his position. He has no active prospects. So he shouldn't blunder the checkmate.
Rook h1,
So rook h1 is
h4. I assume.
h4, I would imagine, and something like, I don't know.
h4, and now you can play king g6, in fact, because there is no square for h4 on h4 for this king. Yeah, king g6, rook g8, f5, kind of kicking the king away.
Not sure.
Or
that,
h5.
Not sure that it really matters.
Yeah, not that it really matters, but at least he is preventing this cute king h5 idea with rook h1.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's always this eternal discussion. How long to play is appropriate in a lost position? I mean, there is nothing wrong, even theoretically, to play until the checkmate. Of course, I mean, very good players, they do not play until checkmate, and they tend to resign very much early when they understand they have no chances. But where's this line? I mean,
Yeah, that's hard to drag because there were some examples like Vasily Ivanchuk, for instance, resigning the game where everything was clear for him, and then people from the crowd they would actually think, yeah, perhaps they agree the draw because nothing is clear. The position is full of chances, right? So. Yeah, the line is somewhere in between, yeah.
And Vishy Anand also has resigned a number of times. He just believes that, for example, computer says, I mean, for the spectators, the computer says +2, and he knows it's a strategically lost position. So he resigns very quickly. He believes that his opponent is going to win this very easily. And not only Vishy Anand, many professional players, and most of the professional players, they resign very quickly, hopeless positions. Not just to waste opponent's time. I don't think they really care about opponent's time, but not to waste his time.
Their own time and
Right.
their own energy, right?
But there's always this question, how much is appropriate? I mean, because at
well,
one moment it starts to look ridiculous. I mean, you are
Yeah, I
having
mean, if you
this
play
lost
rook
position.
down, it's too much. Yeah, but
Right.
here,
But here you have at least some practical chances.
Yeah,
Obviously,
it's-
perhaps white is going to misplace something, because on material, white isn't really so much ahead. What is it? I mean, it's something
it's
like
two bishops.
two bishops versus a rook.
Yeah, two bishops versus the rook.
I mean, technically, this is a winning position, obviously, because those two bishops are so powerful.
But
And
still, you have to. Yeah,
but you have to prove
show.
it.
Yeah, it's like if, for instance, there is no a pawn and white starts moving his a pawn, then this would be a proper time to resign, perhaps. But not yet. I believe everything's.
Well, perhaps this is a very good moment to mention that we have yet another tournament here in the Riga Chess Festival, which is going to start tomorrow. It is the children tournament.
Yep.
Under 14, many children are going to gather here in the Latvian National Library. The tournament starts tomorrow. If I remember correctly, the first round starts at 10 a.m. in the morning, so children will have the opportunity also in the spare time to follow how the world's best chess players from the world they are playing here in Riga, and for them it's an amazing opportunity. Yeah, so
not so many players left, I have to say, but yeah, still it's nice. And yeah, remember those times, like first time I played a game against the national master, and it was a simultaneous display game, of course. When I was like 12, maybe there was a huge event for me. So of course, for those players to see the very best, like Krysiak, Mamedyarov, Wesley Saw, Maxim Shelograf, to see them in the action, that might really be something.
So who knows, perhaps a future star is playing here in Riga. I mean, he is going to play starting from tomorrow, watching these best players in the world. And sometimes for these kids, all is needed is the inspiration that you can be like one of them after something like 10, 15 years.
Right, so king goes to g6.
King g6, not to miss any immediate checkmate.
So h5 will be not possible, and yeah,
Probably
at least
unneeded.
white is not winning just yet, right? In case of rook c8, there will be h5. Kind of kicking.
Or f5 also, for that matter, is possible.
No, but for some reason I thought that if you play f5, you technically do not stop the threat of rook g8. Yeah, and then you can return back to g7. Yeah.
Right. Or play f6, but then
maybe
after
you can
f6
play
there's
f6, yeah.
or even f6. I mean,
Some
the
h5 is
only
here.
idea I can imagine for black, you have to push e6, e5 at some moment. And if you play f6, f5 right now, well, then you cannot really play e6, e5 anymore, so you need to play this preparation move f7, f6, so potentially play e5, but the big problem for this maneuver is that white is not obliged to take on e5.
Yeah, no, I mean, in this particular case, it seems that white is just winning by force, going h5. If the king takes it's a funny check
Right.
from e8 and then checkmate on f7 to follow. If the rook takes, it's the same reason, bishop e8 winning material. If the king goes back, it's h6 and then once again check from e8.
Yeah, also I would like to use the opportunity to remind our dear viewers, you can post your question at one of the official YouTube channels. It's either World Chess YouTube channel or
FIDE YouTube
FIDE
channel.
YouTube channel. We are from time to time monitoring the channel, and if you have an interesting question you would like to be answered, definitely you can use the opportunity and post it there, and we'll do our best and try to find the time and actually answer it.
So bishop d3 from Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Black, of course, takes the opportunity to meet a check with counter-check. He goes f5.
Right. So I don't think it really changes anything. So white has managed to provoke f6, f5 from black, so he is happy to retreat
The king back to
the king.
f3, right? And now you were right, yeah. Now that the pawn is on f5, in order to play e6, e5, black will have to move the other pawn to f6, which creates some extra weaknesses. Rook d1, yeah, but that's what Wesley's going to do. he will try to be, as annoying as possible, simply attacking white's pieces, not giving white the possibility to any direct conversion.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, what to do here? So Wesley has played something. He played rook d1. Attacking a piece, but no real changes
so
here.
That's what I'm trying to say. So Wesley is trying to, just to keep white, not let white to come up with any direct ideas. Even though now that I'm looking at it, is 3G4 a direct idea for white? We have some rearrangement in the studio, and once again, Yannick Pelletier will step in for a couple of minutes this time. This time instead of Arthurs, who didn't have the break. And before that, I was told we have to show some ads. So a couple of minutes of ads, and then I'll be back with Yannick Pelletier here in the studio. Yannick Pelletier once again in the studio, famous grandmaster and as well a press officer in this tournament, right?
Exactly.
So, Yannick, I wanted to ask about your experience playing the knockouts.
Knockouts. I only have one time experience when I played the World Cup in Hantimansisk 2009. When I eliminated Buxianji in the first round. But then came another Chinese, Li Chao, and we had some sort of tiebreaks. It was the only year where there were 4 rapid games in tiebreaks.
Right. There was one year that was special,
exactly.
that the tiebreak was prolonged and you could play like really, really a lot of games.
It was, it lasted like 4 or 5 hours in total. And I lost the 3rd game, I won the 4th, and then we moved to the Blitz, and that's where he knocked me out. But it's in general it's quite interesting to play there. There is a lot of tension. I mean, you have to be focused, and you feel the tension even when you win a game. I mean, the second is there, and you must not lose, and it's not so
There've been so many examples when even the most solid players, and sometimes having the white pieces and only needing a draw, that they just cannot withstand this pressure, right? So,
well, that's exactly what happened to me. Not that I am especially a solid player, but I won the first with black against Li Chao, and I lost the second with white in classical. That's how it happened. Yeah, so it was not very fortunate, but that's how it happened. Yeah.
All right. So we have Mamedyarov and Wesley Son on a screen, and it's very likely that Mamedyarov will have a situation when he only needs a draw, even though he will be playing with black, right?
Exactly, yeah. Well, you can see from the body language that Wesley Son is more or less already
has given up.
More or less given up, yeah. But sometimes it's also, it can be treacherous for his opponent, because that's maybe the reason.
Yeah, I've lost interest. Yeah, you can do whatever you like, and then whenever you misplay the game, I'm back to the game.
At that small point where you lose your focus, then I'm ready to strike back. But okay, what can he do now? He knows he's lost, and
right. So it will be a tough task for Wesley tomorrow. He will have the white pieces. He can open either e4 or d4, so he has played both throughout his career. Last game they've played, last classical game, was Croatia Grand Chess Tour, well, not more than a couple of weeks ago, where Wesley went for d4. I know, was it C? No, it was c4. Yeah, some English opening, anti-Grunfeld. And Shark sacrificed the pawn. Wesley so gave it back, got some slight positional advantage, and won. So he has won against Mamedyarov just a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, so he knows it's not impossible. He's done it not so long ago, and that's actually something to boost your confidence in such moments. That's
absolutely. The fact that you did this just a couple of weeks ago, you know the guy is beatable, so to speak. And once again, Mamedyarov, as strong player as he is, he doesn't have the image of being super solid, right?
Yeah,
so it's more about fighting chess and creating tension on the board. Well, I'm not even sure if he has such experience, like playing for a draw. And the game ended after Shahryar Mamedyarov has played g3, g4, because g takes f5, e takes f5, then the rook is getting to c6, king is getting to f4.
Just loses everything, the whole house collapses.
So Wesley so decided he had enough. Then we can quickly look at Maxim's game against Grishuk. Well, nothing has changed. The rook is still on d3. Rook d1 to d3 was the last move. Grishuk is thinking he must be approaching a time trouble already.
Yeah, that's the only thing which has changed. Half an hour ago it was the same position, but the clock is
position. So Grishuk, I don't know how much time is left, like 15 minutes possibly.
Let me check here.
Well, my connection with digital board seems to be broken, so I don't really see.
He might have only 20 minutes left, if this is right here.
Yeah, so Grishuk is still thinking, and I believe I have to let you go because, the interviews are coming and you have to do your main job. Thanks for joining anyway.
Thanks a lot.
All right, so as I said, Grishuk is still thinking. So 19 minutes, 30 seconds left for Alexander. And it's only move 29, because in Berlin sometimes, when you get this endgame and a lot of moves played quickly, you might think, okay, it can't be too bad. Yeah, the time trouble cannot be too bad, because usually a lot of moves played at once, right? But this time it's only move 21, and if Grishuk, it's obvious that he has to spend quite a lot of time calculating what precisely to do in this position. But then again, if there will be more problems introduced during this game and Grishuk will find himself in a time trouble at the same time, it will be difficult. So not exactly very pleasant situation for Alexander. And that's usually how Maxim is winning his Berlin games. So not really going for anything crazy, but just getting a slight advantage and pushing, keeping the game in control. If the opponent cracks under pressure, then he collects the full point.
I'm happy to be back in the studio. Yannick was replacing me. I'm a bit surprised that Grishuk is still thinking for so long. Probably he cannot really find a direct way to continue this. By the proper way to continue the game, because definitely he missed this move, rook d3, rook f3 maneuver, and it's not an easy task for black not to wind up in an immediately lost endgame. And this is why he's spending so much time.
Has to take a decision, it seems, and I was wondering if, once again, I believe we tried this b4 e5, rook f3, and then we were looking at king b7. But what happens if black just pushes the pawns forward, like b4, and then a4, and so on?
So, for example, I would imagine I would play something like bishop e5.
Bishop e5 nevertheless.
And a4.
Yeah, let's say a4.
With the point being that rook f7 can be met by something as bishop d8.
Yeah, bishop d8.
And if
white takes,
rook
and
h7,
then rook a5. So, well, I have two far advanced passed pawns, or not passed pawns, but far advanced pawns. If I can get to those pawns on second rank, like rook d5, rook d2, then maybe black will be able to generate enough counterplay.
Right, this makes sense. Yeah, and while Grishak is thinking, we might have a guest in the studio.
Yeah, it seems so. We'll figure it out. Yeah.
And while that is happening, I don't know. I mean, what other options are there for Alexander Grishak instead of b5,
to remind
b4,
you,
and
yeah,
a4?
the position is still the same. The rook is on d3, and you know what? I'm looking more and more at this, and I remember Grishak. I mean, it was quite a long time ago. I think it was 2012 Olympiad when he won the very similar game with white. Well, the bishops were not there, so it was a rook endgame, but with a very similar structure. He won such a game with white against Sergei Movsisyan, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was 2012 Olympiad in Turkey. Yeah,
right.
So he, of course, is familiar with all the dangers of this position. So that's what I'm trying to say.
Right. So Alexander is still thinking for a good half an hour and still is not making a move. So definitely he is not happy. But I mean, how long can you be not happy about the position? You have to make a move sooner or later and get on with the game and play for something. And in the meantime, like I mentioned before, we do have a guest in the studio. Shahriar Mamedjarov has, thank you, joined us here in the studio. And can you perhaps explain us what happened in the game?
Okay, we play some old variations. I play this novelty, new move.
Yeah, this we were able to find out. We were checking the database, and a3 is a new move.
It's new move, but it's a very good move. But, okay, I mean, its minimum for one game is very good. And after this move, black need to play very accurately, because the idea is queen b4 every time check. I mean, queen 6, queen b4. But it looks strange, yeah, plays this move but not easy. And he played rook b8, and after the game he says mistakes, and he think after rook b8, e4 is white is better. I mean, he missed. But rook b8, it was the first line. I mean, I remember my analysis, and the rook b8 is a very important move. His problem is e4, yeah. Okay, of course, maybe it's not good, maybe not easy to say about opening secrets, but everyone have engines and everyone can check. And after e4, it looks very bad. Queen d8, queen f8. I mean, first line for engines, it was queen d8. I remember this. But I don't like black positions.
Yeah, that's what we were looking without any engine. That's what we thought. Okay, e5 is a threat. You have to move the queen. You have to put the queen on c8. But then it really looks strange what he did.
I think it's not. I mean, it's like you need to play this, but it's okay. I mean, this looks very dangerous for. And after, I mean, it's take and d5 is coming is okay if you don't know his line, but okay, I mean, of course, I think I never will play against these positions.
Yeah, probably people, this is a problem nowadays. You play a novelty and it normally for one game.
The problem is his line. It is a very strong move for black. It is only just easily. It's a very strong move, but it's not easy to find in the board. It's because you check, take,
and he takes with
rook e1 is because his mistake rook d1 is made.
Wow.
And if he play,
so this was still part of your analysis.
Yeah. But is rook e1 and queen f3 is also losing because rook b1 is winning. Rugby 1 looks very stupid, but was winning every. But this one move is draw is Queen G6.
Wow.
He need to
if you don't know it, it's almost impossible
and also
to find.
I need to play very accurately, because if you use H6, his pawn stay is 3 pawns, yeah, and this Queen E5, and it looks Queen E5
Oh, wow. That's
is draw. And, but okay, I think is of course he will check and he will see his line. But I mean,
and it wasn't much going on afterwards. E5 and you just win. Yes?
I think this is after E5 is no, but I don't. He miss absolutely miss Queen D8. Yeah, it's like is this Bishop E3? But I don't know. I just want to. I calculate maybe he want to play this line Rook B1. It looks strange, but it looks losing. But minimum I calculate this one and Queen take just D6. And,
That's a nice one.
is minimum is winning positions. I mean. And after Rook C1 is winning.
You will just take this
minimum,
pawns one
yeah,
by
minimum.
one.
And I think maybe something.
Maybe there is something better. Yeah.
But it's minimum, yeah. It looks very easy winning. Rook C1 and take very bad pawns for.
Especially with this material, 2 bishops and the rook, Queen has no chance.
At least when we were watching on the live transmission, we felt that you were not happy with the move C3. It felt like you did not check the move.
I check all moves. I remember all moves in these positions, only not C3. But he's very strong chess player when he plays C3, and I think something I miss. Yeah, I cannot. I calculate and everything, and winning. But he missed Rook E2 move.
Yeah, that's what we missed in the studio because we thought C2 is clever and maybe he has a chance. Like for example,
Rook
in
B1,
this
Rook E1,
case,
Rook B1,
takes. So it turns out Shahryar had seen everything that we were analyzing here. Rook A1.
Rook B1.
Maybe he has chances.
Yeah, of course. I know. Not this. I lose this. I think bishop. So I need to play. Yeah, I need to play this, but I don't take and
Rook A2.
And these two, maybe 2 pawns. But no, why? I mean, of course, Rook C2, and after Rook C2 is if I play Rook C2, after Rook C2 is easy, of course.
Rook A2, Queen D5, and this is easily winning.
No, it is. Normally, I think this is finished, of course. After E5 is finished.
So, well, very unexpected. I don't know, for us it was very unexpected, and I believe for you maybe it was also very unexpected to win the game in such an easy way. You played a very good novelty, and then your opponent seems to be in.
Yeah, it's a very important new move, because if you don't know, it's line knight E4, which is very nice, but only is very knight take E4 is because...
And computer shows it, yeah?
Yeah, computer first is, I don't know, Queen D8, Queen E5 is very happy with positions, but I think for people's is people without pawns 0-0, but it looks
it looks
with center 2 bishops, and but if not after knight E4,
it's just a draw. And what about the tiebreak yesterday? It was really tense at some point.
No, but
he played it like Mamedyarov against you. G4, G5.
After the game, we speak, and I say him, it was not good. Choose variation against me, because I play every time like this, and every time after the game I check, I have every time bad positions, because for engines is very good for black, and how many times I play this position, I now just play these moves, Rook E8 or knight, maybe Karya can play against me knight E8. It was my game, G4, Rook G1, I play against Karyakin in last year in the Grand Tour. And of course, it was not. But first game, I was absolutely. I mean, he missed knight H7. I mean, But why I need to take immediately knight H7, and is absolutely winning, easy winning positions. I mean, with pawn. But okay, of course, we all know is Duda is very strong, rapid blitz chess player, and. He, of course, against him, it was not easy to play tiebreak. Young, strong, but okay. I mean, I was very happy with win second game.
Yeah, so congratulations. And you were mentioning it, there were some issues during the first match. I don't know if you fully recovered. Now it looks better. You won a classical game for a second time in this tournament. So good luck, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that was Shahryar Mamedyarov with us in the studio. It was amazing to see for him scoring such an important and quick victory. Really unexpected, also for himself. And since you were witnesses, he did not really expect this move c3, which happened in the game. And I guessed actually correctly. He was not happy initially. Like Shahryar said, that you do not really expect strong players by making such big blunders early on. So definitely his first thoughts were that he expected that he had missed something in analysis, but apparently he did not. So he calculated everything to the win, and it was a smooth win for the Azerbaijani player in the end. Well, about Wesley, I hope that he will recover from this painful, a very quick loss in the first round. And
yeah, well, let's hope that tomorrow we will have the game. Yeah, because some people might give up in this situation, just go for a draw. But no, I don't believe Wesley is such kind of a player. I believe he will try his best to level the score tomorrow.
Yeah, he should probably just forget the game and move on, and and try to change some things. And in the meantime, we have a couple of moves in the game between Maxime Vachier-Lagrave against Alexander Grishuk, and it seems that Grishuk has followed your advice.
Okay, not that it was my advice, but it was one of the lines we were looking at, and well, the timing is impressive. 33 minutes he spent before playing b7, b5.
Well, it was a critical position, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So here, as we were looking, if you guys follow us and remember that, we were looking at least at 4 different moves. It was b5, it was b6, it was a4, it was bishop e7, and possibly something else. Yeah, and I was saying that perhaps c6, c5 is also an option. So, of course, he had to make sure that he has done everything precisely. So, b5, rook to f3, b4, bishop to e5, a4. So now, white has a chance to simplify into a bishop's ending, which will be a draw. Rook f8. Well, I don't know, maybe bishop d8 is what he means, and then there will be no bishop ending. But I thought king b7, white trades, bishop takes c7, and then to eliminate all the questions, black has b3,
right.
White takes twice, and then bishop f6 wins the pawn back. It's material equal, somewhat better structure, but for bishop's ending, as long as your pawns are nicely placed on the colors, the opposite of the color of the bishop, nothing can happen.
I mean, okay, if white could somehow try to liquidate the bishops and try to exchange very quickly, bring the king to e4 and then play bishop e5 and somehow force black to trade the bishops, then he probably could hope to win the pawn endgame. But I mean, black is not obliged to do it. After the possible trade, he'll just go away. So I think actually Grishuk has found a good practical resource.
So the question is, what's his reply to rook f7? Will it be the thing that we were looking at, bishop d8, and then if the pawn is taken, he'll come up with this, and then rook d5? Maybe
well,
that's
it definitely makes sense, because white is...
Or maybe a3 now. Remember you wanted to play a3. Maybe this is the time to play a3.
And only then play rook a5, rook d5.
a3, if b3, then rook a5 with the tempo, f4, rook d5 with the tempo, and who knows, maybe it's black who's playing for win, because now those c2, a2 pawns seem to be helpless.
Maybe it will even end up with some kind of a repetition, something like rook h8, king d7, rook h7. I mean, white cannot continue, black cannot continue, and as it often happens, I mean, both of the sides just have to call it quits.
This, and now with king b7, it gives me the time to go king f1, right, and king e2, guard the d file.
Well, this looks possible. Definitely, it looks possible, and also, I wanted to mention yet another idea of moving these pawns so much forward is that white cannot really afford, most likely he cannot afford to waste time to take these pawns at the king side.
Yeah, any sort of a race will be in black's favor with, having the pawn on a3.
Yeah, so it might be just that white doesn't have anything real. I mean, it felt like a nice idea, but but at least black, by the looks of it, is holding.
Yeah, and there is a possibility that Maxim will play rook f8. And wait, and I'm thinking,
I think rook f8 is agreement to the draw, isn't it?
Yeah, after king b7. But my point is, can black all of a sudden get ambitious? Because now the pawn ending, it's pawn up for black,
Yeah,
right?
but you just play something like rook h8, I would imagine. So
Rook h8.
I cannot imagine this for black to play for the win with such a passive king and f4.
Rook a5, f4,
And
rook,
wait, there's rook d5.
rook
Right.
d5. Yeah,
What
so
if now I activate the king f1?
King f1, yeah, and I still can't take the pawns because bishop f6 is there. No, that's...
I don't
that's too
believe that
much.
actually black can play here. He should be happy for
it
the
felt
draw.
like being too much.
Right.
Playing for a win, keeping the king on c8 and moving his bishop back. Yeah,
Right.
It's just that, just to check if black can or cannot allow himself to be ambitious. Yeah, rook f8, of course, you just play king b7. And maybe it is important to include a4, a3 at some point.
Well, that's something what Maxim doesn't want to do. I mean, obviously, he still wants to play on, and especially he sees that his opponent is so much down on time, and he has the time advantage. He has, at least he thinks he has at this moment, a positional advantage. So rook f8, rook a liquidate into a drawing bishop endgame is not something he wants to do, but I mean, he will keep it in his mind. I mean, if he'll find nothing better, then he'll just go for this endgame and call it a day.
Wait a second, how was the other line we were trying? Rook f7, king here. And what if white plays some
Immediately
prophylactical
king f1.
move like king f1 first? So
That
that
makes
after
sense.
a3, b3, rook a5, f4, rook d5, king e2, at least for now, well, king e2 of course, at least for now, black can't really attack those pawns. Maybe black in this case has rook d7 and once again transposing to an endgame. But
Right.
we have rook f8 check on the board.
I believe the idea is to move the king further to b7 and then continue with rook f7. I would imagine.
It could be. It could be.
Although, now that I'm looking at it, I start to question what happens after something like rook d8 even might be possible. It's not so clear.
Rook d8. So that
A sudden resource
if black
wasn't there.
if white takes, black of course is happy to
Right.
go forward with the king and then rook d1 or rook d2.
Right.
Yeah, if the bishop takes, black has rook d1 check, king h2, and might claim that it's a sort of a similar.
It is similar. I'm not sure is it exactly the same. Although, okay, you still need to understand what's going on after something like f4. Maybe I'm just imagining things, and maybe this is not
Bishop
something that's going to
d8.
happen.
Here, for some reason, I mean, once again, having those pawns on a4, b4, I'm less scared of any kind of races, right?
Right.
So it's like trade. If this happens, rook d2, I'm pretty sure black is more than okay.
Is Alexander still choosing between bishop d8 and king b7? Can it be? Is he
Yeah,
really
it
ambitious?
It seems that. And once again, by the same token, maybe bishop d8 is not the ambitious move, but the safer move, right? Like, so just to go bishop d8 and then still come up with this a3 and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, Krishuk has the time. In his universe, 10 minutes is more than enough.
How much time does he have?
Well, around 10 minutes.
That should be enough.
Move 23. So it's 10 minutes plus a total of 8.5 minutes of increment, right?
Right. Well, I cannot really imagine him playing bishop d8. Perhaps he's just double checking what happens after king b7, because perhaps he just wants to make sure he's not ending up in a lot worse bishop endgame. For example, trade, bishop c7, and this resource of b3 is important because let's assume, I mean, if black doesn't have it, he plays something like
king b7, bishop e5 does something,
and then
white
you play
goes
b3.
b3, right?
And this is sort of slightly unpleasant, although probably still should
Probably
be
still
easy to-
holdable, but yeah, this is not something you'll be really happy about. Well, probably
should be draw,
no
right?
major things, yeah.
Put the king
C5
on
and bring the
D5.
king
Right.
to D5. So it has to be a bit more weaknesses. It's like if in some moment white would have been able to play A4, black doesn't take it, and then we go for this endgame. Then, of course, white is very happy.
Right.
So right, king B7 seems to be good enough. But Krishuk is still
And
thinking.
bishop d8 is just counterintuitive. I mean, even if white manages to bring king f1, king e2, f4, I mean, there is no way that black is playing ever.
Yeah,
this for
king
the win.
f1, yeah.
King
For
f1 and
instance,
king
this,
e2 and f4.
f4, rook d5, king e2.
Even if he manages to keep the pawn, rook d7, but I mean, players of such a
Wait
caliber.
second.
No,
What we say is just nonsense,
Right.
honestly, because here it's bishop f6, and how do you unpin yourself?
Yeah, I see. I talk complete nonsense because Grishuk did play bishop d8 in the end. That's a surprise.
I called nonsense my idea of playing rook a5, rook d5, because this is... how do you unpin it? Well, you go c4, then you go c5, then c6, then king c7. That seems the only way to unpin. Well, looks dangerous.
That is dangerous, isn't it?
Yes, bishop d8. We are questioning this move, to be honest. I'm not necessarily sure that this was the right decision.
I'm officially surprised. Well, perhaps he did not like, indeed, this line after king b7, rook f7. Something here, because the king supposedly is dragged further away.
Yeah, and then in some moment, white will have a tempo with rook d7, let's say, returning the rook to d file. Maybe that was the issue.
Something, perhaps he felt he has to play something like bishop d8, but I mean, I cannot imagine this. I mean, this is strange.
And still I don't quite understand, your rook d8 move.
It makes more sense, at least, judging from this point of view, to play rook d8, to play active, not to play passive.
You know what? Maybe this is the problem, this very moment. So that... I know, this is not a problem. I give a check, go to d8, yeah? Yeah?
Well, maybe even f4 is a problem, I don't know.
f4, I was still not
Although we were looking
sure
something
about.
similar.
f4, bishop h4, and then this bishop gets to g3 and so on. No, my brilliant idea was that you gonna take, I'll play g3, I'll play f4, force the bishop to h6, and then take on h7. Oh, well, that sounds nice, but the problem is, that black actually takes, and after g3, gives a check, and goes bishop d8.
Right. So
ending up being 2 pawns up.
That doesn't really work. So what after rook d8?
Yeah, here after rook d8. Maybe white just has to take it.
Bishop takes on c7, so that forces rook d1.
Check, king goes here, king goes to a6.
Although there's still this f4 threat, and you play bishop d8, right?
And and I think we were looking at it, f4, bishop d8, and at least
Otherwise,
maybe you keep the bishops now. Maybe that's the idea. It's like you keep the bishops. Again, not clear whatsoever. Rook d2.
You know, to be honest, now that I look at this, I think that Grishuk is not ambitious. He just believed that bishop d8 is a better defensive resource. I think he still is obviously defending it. I don't believe that he's definitely not playing for the win, although he has the extra pawn. There was something that he did not like after king b7, and it must be along the lines. I don't think that Maxime would have traded rook a8, and definitely Grishuk did not avoid the draw.
Certainly not something to be afraid of.
Right, especially with the black pieces in such a mini-match. So he did not like this line after rook f7. And now the question is what to do for white. White feels better. I mean, he has a decent compensation for the pawn. I don't know. I would think about something like along the lines of f4 or king f1, king e2, activate the pieces in the beginning, and then claim I have some sort of a great compensation. But
what's the very next move after king f1? Because as we figured out, this doesn't look so attractive after bishop f6, and then you'll have to put the rook on d5 and stay there almost forever, right?
Perhaps this even leads to some kind of a lost pawn endgame, because white can,
you've also committed your pawns to b4, c4. Yeah, right. So it's this, rook d5, king comes closer.
let's assume black plays something like c5 and c6, trying to get rid of the pin,
C5.
and in some favorable moment, white trades on d8 and then presumably wins the pawn in him. I don't know. I mean, perhaps even now. No, it's not possible. Then you bring the king to c6. I had this idea to trade and then bring king quickly to the c4, but it doesn't really work.
The thing is, however, do you really want to find out with black if it holds or not, right?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
maybe, I mean, I can always play rook h8, then
trade here, take on h7, still be better. And maybe not to win this game, but still be better, of course.
To some degree.
That's once again means that bishop f8 is the defensive move in his trying to save the game, and it's not clear if it was needed. We still don't see anything wrong with king b7.
Although, this rook f7 was annoying and definitely must be the reason why he did not play it. So after rook d8, he probably did not find the accurate defense, and might be just because of this activation of the bishop you mentioned about this line rook d8 and something like along the lines of bishop takes on c7, rook d1 check, king h2, whatever move black makes, king a6, f4, bishop
and maybe bishop d8 was
and bishop e5. Maybe something along the lines, because it I don't know. Still quite unpleasant. I look at the bishop on e5, it is guarding the pawn on b2. And if black plays something like pure speculation, rook d2, you just take the pawn on h7, and those kingside pawns for white should march forward. Although, I mean, even this looks holdable.
This looks, once again, might be horrible, but this looks as well quite double-edged, right? Because at some point I might just play a3.
Right, exactly.
So that would have been a different game. Let's agree on this, and let's see what Maxim Vachier-Lagrave comes up with after bishop d8. Because it seems that he has like a comfortable advantage with moves like king f1, king e2, as we said. Bishop f6 immediately, which forces king d7. Okay. Wait a sec. How do you unpin here?
A rook h8? Right? That must be his idea.
Rook h8 is an option.
No, I mean, I unpin very easily. I play rook c8.
You play rook c8.
So he must be transferring the game into a better rook endgame, I would imagine.
This?
And rook c8 now. Can you go for the pawn endgame?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I trade, and I go there.
You make it in time. No, you don't make it in time. Or do you? King d7, king d3, you make it in time.
c5.
Yeah, c5, exactly.
King c4, king c6.
Right. It's essentially the same. I was looking at in a different variation.
Now wait, do you make it in time? King c4, king c6, c3. You take, I take with the king. At some point I might play b3, take with the king, create outside pass pawn. So I'm not saying that this is winning, but this is very tricky, and just to go for it is you know. Right. And Maxim goes the other way.
Yeah, rook h8 would feel the human choice.
King d7, rook h8.
But still, with the king so far away, can he actually hope to win this? Although, right, he is not even obliged to take on d8. Look at this. I mean, if black actually plays rook c8, he can even take on h7 and then move away with the bishop.
Black is forced to play h5, it seems.
Yeah, so it would seem, right.
Black is forced to play h5. Because really, after rook c8, this is completely winning, because it's the same rook endgame, but
right.
Or pawn endgame, if you like.
That's a nice resource.
A slight difference that white is the pawn up on the king side.
So h5 should be played automatically, and now white probably can play something like f4, I would imagine.
I have a question. If I do this...
And b3? I would imagine, no?
b3...
sort of like automatic response?
No, that's not right. No, my point was that I wanted to sack an exchange and take the pawn on b2 and not to lose my a pawn. Because in this line, if I take this one immediately, rook takes, bishop takes. If not for rook a4, I would be relatively happy. If I'm allowed to put the pawn on a3 and then, you know, moved like c5, c4, maybe I'm not lost, like completely lost. Maybe that would be a chance. But of course, yeah, rook a4 and it's all over.
Yeah. So it would seem, so I don't think that is a possibility. So what about h5 right now? So
Yeah,
how do you
let's
proceed
find
if
out.
you're white?
h5. Well, the least I can do is to go rook g8 and still enter this same rook endgame after rook c8, take on d8, take on g6.
And now instead of the rook c8, which actually forces white's reply, actually black can play something useful. I mean, something like c5 perhaps, because white is going to take on
d8 and
anyway.
g6 anyway.
Right. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I would bring the king closer, king f1.
Yeah, white might as well speculate. Yeah, as long as you're not playing rook c8, I'm not taking this thing.
So something like...
Oh, wait, can there be that we are once again missing something? b3.
We are missing something. Right, and the idea is we can show it...
And how about previous move b3? How about...
No, but we are not missing. Anyway, because a takes on b3 supposedly wins, no? Now rook takes on d8 and bishop
now
d8.
you trade on d8.
Yes, and then there's bishop g5
takes,
in there.
and there is no b3 takes c2 because of bishop g5.
But that is a very nice idea.
Yeah, because king d8, this should be... Oh, well, is this lost? Because that's still an equal number of pawns, and of course we will be unable to calculate that.
I have no idea.
Yeah, and you can imagine, I mean, how tough it is for the players. And I do realize that Krzysztof, in fact, has absolutely the same idea in this position. He can go for b3, where the king is actually further away, right?
Right.
So a takes. Well, now at the very least, white can take on h7 and take on d8. But this is a draw, right? I
don't know. Yeah, it's essentially the same.
check
Yeah,
takes
and black wins the piece back. Yeah, okay, one and c1.
So if
He's
white
going for this. Look at this. He
b3
calculated.
played, yeah. So maybe this is what he was calculating.
Wow.
So b3 played. Now things going to be revealed very, very soon. And did Maxim miss it?
Well, I don't think you usually expect something like this. When you play idea like rook f8, bishop f6, rook h8, you expect that black is going to do something obvious like rook c8, perhaps c5. b3, initially, I would not exactly include in my calculations, but
so
probably Maxim
takes,
already expected it while Alexander was calculating.
Takes, and now white has...
Obviously, white cannot take c takes on b3, right? Because
cb3, that's rook a1 check, and then the bishop on f6 is taken.
And that is a sad game, a sad end of this game. So obviously, a takes, at least you have to take with the aim pawn, because you cannot take on d8, right? Rook d8, bishop d8 is...
Yeah, this is also like
a different end.
Funny variation. B takes a2 and black promotes, yeah. So ab3 seemingly is forced. Now what you can do, you can capture here.
And that should be a draw.
King d6. Bishop takes d8, right?
Although I'm not so sure if this is a draw, because the g6 pawn might be falling.
Wait, but I'm taking this one, I thought.
And bishop g5?
Bishop g5, I'm coming up with a check. c1 takes, and it felt like black should be on time. I mean, you can take the g pawn, right?
Wait a second, Yevgeny. I had no, I have a ridiculous idea. I had another idea. I thought instead of the rook a1 check and c1, I thought to make the eternal attack on the bishop. But it probably doesn't work, does it?
Rook a5.
Rook a5, that was the idea, but I'm not so sure it works.
I can give a check.
And e5? Can I force a draw here?
There.
Yeah, bishop h6 is a very good point.
So probably still you will have to settle for
No, I had this
c1,
idea.
yeah?
If you play bishop e3,
yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
Then rook a1 check, king h2. That was my big idea. Maybe it's not so big after all. So king h2 and rook e1.
He won, and still he goes back to g5.
Yeah, and still goes back to g5 or h6
But
for that.
essentially, yeah, what we are trying to get is some position like that. And in case of rook g7, black has rook c2. And I believe that those c pawns are just as dangerous as as white's pawns here.
But I don't think
it's
that
hard to say.
White is not even risking anything because he can try to bring the king closer, king g3, king f3. There's no way he's ever going to lose this.
Yeah, no, white will never lose. Yeah,
So it's a good
try. I'm trying to say that black should be holding this, but
so this
who
is
knows?
a very
That's
good
one
try.
of the possible tries.
But what else is there? I mean, you can always go for the pawn endgame, right?
Yeah, but this is the, I believe, the crucial question. Like this, and then I trade the rooks on d8. And now bc2, bishop g5 is just lost.
Right.
So black has to capture on d8 with the bishop. C takes b3. And who's faster? Well, black kind of starts first. So he's bringing his king to 5th rank. And maybe this is... Oh, no, wait. This way, black brings his king to b4 and apparently wins the game. Because he has too many extra tempi.
He can make a lot of tempi, like c5, c6, two extra tempi.
Let's be perhaps more precise that he wins the game after king c2. Yeah, he does win the game after king c2.
So white cannot really go there, actually.
c5 or... Yeah, there should be.
Is this forced? Did we miss something?
It's forced if white wants to go to a pawn endgame, yes.
Right.
So rook d8, bishop takes, king d7. I mean, I don't know to what degree it is forced, but the feeling is like you have to run with the king, right?
Unless you run for the e-pawn.
That's like you go f4, you go there. It's almost clear that black is not risking much.
I mean, black can even play e5, and that at least should be a draw.
Yeah,
so I cannot imagine Maxime going
like that,
for this.
For instance,
although I was already proved wrong today. I mean, I said that I cannot imagine for Alexander playing bishop d8, and he did play bishop d8.
King has to go back to b3 in order to move those pawns. g4, c5, f5. White promotes first, black promotes, has an extra tempo, extra pawn, should be a draw again. White starts checking.
Right.
I mean, this is not in-depth analysis, of course, but at the first glance, at least, it does seem that the pawn endgame is not dangerous for black. So I wonder if...
So it would seem, and this is why Alexander Grishuk was actually spending so much time, he had to make sure that this is a playable position. This is why he was taking so much time when he played his 24th move, bishop d8. He had to understand what is going on after bishop f6, king d7, and he had to see the move b3. I mean, you don't go for this position without this move.
What about this? Takes an a3. Can this be dangerous? Point being that perhaps I just want to swap here. Let's put it this way. If black doesn't play c5, black, okay, saves the pawn, right? Just trade. I have an outside passed pawn, right? King f1.
I mean, you're not even obliged to rush.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not even forced to take yet. But
you can make a useful tempi like king f1. That should be decisive.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to say. And does black have...
So I would imagine black needs to play something like c5, c4 very quickly, and then there comes the idea of sacrificing
here.
the exchange.
Right. The problem after c5 that if white trades now, he's not on time. King f1, but c4, king e2, c3.
But I think there is another problem, Yevgeny, because after c5, I'm already threatening to play bishop takes on f6, which was your idea.
After king f1, there is bishop takes f6.
And after rook a8, bishop b2, rook b8, you have access to c5, c4.
Yeah.
Well,
Takes.
This looks very risky for white.
c4, a4. No, a4 I've already
c3,
lost after
c2 ends the game. Yeah.
And it is the game no matter what, because king e2, it's still c3, c2.
Right. So at least the first glance at this position is that a3
He's met with c5.
He's met with very powerful c5 idea, and white cannot, unless white, of course, continues something like bishop c3. I mean,
or takes first and then bishop
or,
c3. Yeah.
Right, or takes
Check,
first.
king goes somewhere and,
Bishop
c3. And,
so what about that?
but this is... I don't see white being better here, honestly. This rook c4, always they're going to be a threat to sacrifice on c3. Don't see white being better in this position.
So you can understand why Maxime is right now taking his time, because he has so many lines to calculate. I mean, the first line he has to calculate. Should I go to the pawn endgame? I think it's quite simple. He'll calculate that black is going to bring the king to the b4 and probably make the decision it's not playable, right? I mean, usually you have to cross, you have to draw the line and say, okay, this is not playable. The second, he needs to understand what is going on if I include a takes, rook d8. I mean, it's essentially the same, but where was this second line?
The rook endgame. There was the rook endgame as well.
Right, the rook endgame.
Takes on h7, king goes here, takes
and now
here.
bishop d8. So, and now this position after b takes on c2, bishop g5, this is all forced. For these guys to calculate this line, this is a piece of cake, to be honest. But, I mean, at least the first 4 or 5 moves, it's absolutely forced. And he has to understand what is the final position in this line, because he does win the g-pawn, and then we covered this line earlier. I make an assessment, can I do this? And then finally, he needs to calculate...
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this position, I think it's actually quite possible that he might go here. And the third choice he's facing right now, that he might actually, after b3, play c takes, a3. Presumably, there is no immediate capture on f6. At least it doesn't look like there is,
Yeah,
unless.
And
c5.
now we go c5.
Wow.
Aha.
Look
And now
at
we
that.
go c5.
Look at that.
And wow.
Wow, you need to
This,
calculate this.
then you do this.
c4.
Rook goes here. And black plays c5 and black plays king c6. And do you want to play it on the board? And then b2 is gone. And yeah, I mean, this looks scary.
It's not an easy decision. I mean,
It looks really scary for white, because this pawn turns into a monster now. Well, and once again, c5 is forced, c4 is forced. Here, black already has choices. Black can take this one, take on a3.
I mean, and knowing how
Once
quickly
again.
Maxime calculates the lines, I mean, he's definitely already checking this line. And I mean, at some moment, you have to trust your initiative. I'm sorry, not initiative, but intuition,
yeah.
right? So if your intuition says this is dangerous and you have something safer as an alternative.
My intuition says I don't want to see a pawn on b3, to be honest.
Yeah, so does mine. So I would probably go for this rook endgame, because that's the safe choice. Unless, of
you're
course, Maxime
safe and-
calculates it. And what is the alternative here? There is no other alternative.
Yeah, pawn endgame doesn't really work. This one with extra exchange seems to be very dangerous, so that's what you do. Yeah, you take a b3, you take what we said on h7.
Right? No, we don't. I think we... or we do.
Or d8. Isn't it the same thing?
No, we... how did this happen? So we take... Bishop takes on...
No, wait. Taking on d8 is actually bad. Because
Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah. So he
It's not
has
the same.
has to take on h7 first. King goes here. Right. Bishop takes
Now this is
here.
the accurate order of the moves. And now we
Yeah,
have...
BC, we said BC2. Now that I'm looking at it, rook d8 is not worse than BC2, because
It is
here
essentially the same, no?
looks pretty much the same.
Right.
So, well, the difference being that in this position, king is on g1.
And there it was on
this
h2.
position, the king was on h2. So not clear what do you prefer, because here white can play king g3 and have the king on third rank, but on the other hand, he has to spend the tempo on king g3,
Right.
while in the other position, where was the other position? This one, he can already start running with h4.
A very big decision for Maxime.
Yeah, but it looks he is...
Looks like a forced decision, actually, unless there is yet another alternative. probably he's double, triple checking everything related to c takes on b3, because if it is possible, it might be just a strategically winning position, because you have a passed pawn on the
takes a3, and as we said, if you let white to play bishop c3, and especially if rook h7, bishop c3 happens, then of course white is very happy.
So he needs to calculate everything related of bishop takes on f6, rook a8, and c5, and make sure it actually works for white. Because you do not want to calculate badly and end up in a lost position.
And it probably doesn't work, yeah?
Well, I don't know.
Our conclusion, I believe, was that it's at least very, very dangerous. So c5...
Well, the king is so far away.
I know, c5 allows bishop c8, so it is bishop f6.
Yeah, bishop f6, rook a8, and c5.
Rook a8 and c5.
But that's an amazing move, I mean...
I cannot imagine going for it, I mean, even if it somehow, by some miracle, works. So this seems to be almost
forced. Right? c4.
c4.
I mean, you want to take on b2. Rook b4 is forced.
And then black even has options, either taking this and this, which, by the way, looks more than convincing. Because what to play now? b2 is... Or c5 is a threat, I mean. Essentially, black has two pawns for an exchange.
You're right.
More active pieces. One pawn is on b3. Why on earth black has to be worse here?
Yeah, so there is no reason for Maxim to go for this. Grishuk doesn't even need to find this beautiful intermezzo, what you mentioned. Instead of the bishop takes on b2, you mentioned activating the
here,
king. Yeah, you mentioned...
There was some... Oh, no, wait.
No, after rook b8, c4, rook b4, you mentioned c5 and king, whatever, c6 or d6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this just... a3, that was the line. Yeah, a3, we were taking rook a8, c5 here, c4 here, and we were... I was looking at this first, which might as well be very good, right?
Might be, right.
Yeah, but the trivial bishop takes b2 seems to be good enough.
Look at that.
Takes a4.
Wow.
Does it make things different? a4. And Grishuk didn't... wait. Can we check this one? Same thing. Takes c5. What's going on there? Maybe a pawn is fast enough. Maybe this is the point.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I did not see this move, and now that I look at it, it makes perfect sense. But
c5,
this is a race of the pawns.
We play rook b8 here, and then a5, yeah? Or maybe start with a5. Or does it make difference? a5, bishop b2, a6.
Something like c4, and although a7...
a7, right. And
rook d8 is a
rook
check.
d8 is a check, yeah.
Right.
So for some reason... no, I've even seen rook d8 check. For some reason I thought, I go b2, but then you don't need rook d8, you just go rook b8.
Right.
Okay, so that's a very important... That's a difference maker, this a4 move. So it seems that black cannot really take. That's why Grishuk has played c5, white goes a5, black goes c4.
So I would imagine you want to play a6 and just swap on d8. But wait a second, what's going on? Because after a6, potentially the idea is after trade, black plays c3. I don't know. What is going on there?
No, maybe c3 this moment. c3 this moment. Right. So that you have to take with the bishop and black takes on a6 happily.
Wow. So we have a study-like endgame on the board.
All right, so a6 is not a move. Bishop c3 might be the move now, right? So that the a5 pawn is defended, h7 pawn is hanging, and what Maxim is calculating, can he take h7 pawn first with a check and then play bishop c3? Well, it's got very sharp all of a sudden, and remember I was saying that Grishuk, in fact, spends a lot of time at some point, and possibly now he's regretting he doesn't have more time. So c takes, and instead of a3, a4 was played. c5, a5.
a5 and c4 is on the board, so what to do here?
well, exchange on d8 is too early because the black king is in the square of the a pawn, and black will win in this case.
Let us also not forget, black is threatening bishop takes on f6.
Yeah, if you do not...
King f1, for example.
If you do not advance in this situation, let's see.
King f1, bishop
f1,
f6.
we capture here.
So it forces the reply.
Takes,
bishop b2.
Bishop b2.
So a6 you have to try, otherwise...
a6, bishop goes here.
Or maybe even c3, c2 is winning. You queen the first, but you lose.
Here, c3.
a7 and c2.
a7, c2. So you can give a check.
And then resign.
After this, queen and king to e7. That's just a study.
That's picturesque position,
That's a
isn't
study.
it?
I mean, no checks whatsoever, and c2, c1 promotes. Yeah, and I mean, if I don't want to be so fancy, I probably win with king e7 as well, because a8, it's c1 queen, and again, a lot of check. But this is nice, of course, to take on d8. Okay, what does it mean that...
It means we have a very complex endgame, and Grishuk is relatively in time trouble. He has under 10 minutes. What is the precise count of his clock?
Yeah,
what does it say?
Sure, 7. Yeah,
7 minutes.
7. a6 played, so that's a safe move. Now, black can't take on f6, so it seems the only move for black is to play c3.
Well, I would say c3 is the safe move, because after bishop takes on c3, rook a6, at least black is not... he doesn't have to worry about a white queening immediately, unless there's something else. I mean, c3 is the human choice, obviously.
But there wasn't... It seemed like there wasn't any other move, yeah? After a6. Or, well, first of all, c3 is not yet played.
No, I think he's going to play it. I mean,
feels
it makes more sense.
It will be played. Yeah.
It will be played. I mean, it makes more sense, definitely. And it's still a material equality. After c3, bishop takes on c3, most likely is going to happen on the board. And after rook a6, rook h7 check, it's still material equality. And it's not even clear who is playing for the win, because black has this advanced pawn on b3.
Takes. Yeah, for some reason I thought white is a pawn up and black has the compensation, but no, it's equal number of pawns, so it's not even clear what's going on there.
But yet again, I might return to one of my ideas earlier. I mentioned that perhaps this is how the game actually will end. Yet again, I'm looking for ways
h7. No?
What?
No? And how the game's going to end?
No, I mean, I had this idea that there's going to be an eternal attack on the bishop. For example, bishop c3, rook a6, rook h7, king c8, and rook h8, rook h7, rook h8. I mean, because it is so dangerous for white to continue with such a pawn on b3, and black presumably cannot avoid this. But perhaps he can. I mean, after king d7, rook h7, he can be aggressive.
Try to go to c6.
Right,
yeah?
Exactly.
Try to go to c6. Then it depends. Well, there is rook h8 in this case. And when you move the bishop, there is rook b8, and seemingly there is no way to save the b pawn. Or, wait, there is, yeah? Rook b6. Even something like this. I mean, who said that white is better?
I didn't say that.
Really, no. I thought like to trade, and then the h pawn is running, but this is very dangerous pawn there on b3.
It still feels about equal. I mean, it's material equality, and black's pawn structure is ruined, but the pawn on b3 is so far advanced that it should be technically okay for black, but, well, I don't know.
Yeah, so 10 moves left till the time control.
On rook h7 was on the board.
Rook h7 was played?
Yes, it was played relatively
rook
quickly.
takes h7 was played, yes.
So feels like king c6 should be the move to do. Pretty much automatic. You want to like activate the king, or perhaps it does matter where the king will stand in the upcoming positions. Perhaps king d6 is more accurate, but to be honest, I don't think so.
Well, so king...
But perhaps king d6 comes with the idea that after bishop takes on c3, rook a6, at some moment you can activate your rook a6, c6, and
Yeah, maybe you want to bring your rook to
sacrifice it?
c6 and threaten to sacrifice on c3. And honestly, I was as well looking at this moment. Maybe black wants to use time to say play bishop g5 for whatever reason. I mean, to try to get it somewhere, because a6 pawn is not yet possible to protect.
And king d6 is on the board. Yeah,
King
so
d6.
Alexander wants to keep the option available for him, perhaps. Or, by the way, he just doesn't stand in front of the c pawn, right? It's also
Yeah.
logical. I mean, he just wants to advance the c pawn at some time.
So rook takes a6, right? Now, white actually has to care to be able to stop the b pawn, because rook c6 is sort of not really a threat, but rook c6 will come with a threat of taking on c3, let's say.
I think
Let's put
this
it
threat
this way.
might be even more dangerous if black targets it from something like rook a1, rook c1.
Yeah, that's how you do it, exactly. Yeah, let's say white, absolutely careless, gets rook g7, then check, rook c1, so that bishop b4 check is met with c5, and it's a question. It looks like this bishop doesn't have enough squares on the diagonal, especially since I've played rook g7. Yeah, in case of bishop d4, it's c5.
And now only black can be playing for the win, because c5, c4, c3, so quickly the pawns are marching forward. And perhaps the whole setup for Maxime playing the c takes c takes on b3, a takes on b3, and a4.
It looked very ambitious, but now I'm not sure if he's happy with it. I'm not
Because
sure.
he also needs to be careful. And I felt that going to that rook endgame was the safe choice. But
Yeah, it was absolutely safe. He could, once again, let's remind our viewers, it doesn't matter which pawn you start taking there, right? Oh, no, it does.
no, it does.
Because
I think
now
you
you're
need to
not in time. Yeah. So the safer choice was to take here, to give a check on h7, to take on d8. Yeah, and then black gets something like this, where white is a pawn up yet, but will lose both of his b pawns, will take the g pawn, and some position like that, h4, and black will run with c5.
At least
Who knows?
that's what we felt, but perhaps Maxime calculated that this is easily holding, so, who knows? He
Yeah.
definitely saw the idea.
But c takes a4 seems to be the way to complicate matters to play for a win, but in the current position after rook a6, it's not clear who's playing for a win. I mean, white should be holding this no problem. Ah, wait. Is this rook a6? Yeah, is this the way to force a draw, by the way? Rook h8, if the bishop moves, it's rook b8, right?
Right, you're absolutely right. Because you cannot really move away with the bishop, can you?
Well, anywhere, let's say rook,
Rook b8,
here,
and that's it.
rook b6.
Rook b6 looks too ambitious, doesn't it?
It loses to simply trade and bishop b4,
and
bishop b4 check.
right.
Yeah.
So this might be a draw already.
So after rook h8, king d7, check on h7,
And there goes my eternal attack on the bishop on d8. So I'm sure Maxime sees this and he is just considering, can he actually continue to play for the win? But can he?
King
and
f1.
he does.
He does.
King f1.
So that makes perfect sense. And after a check, he wants to bring the king closer and then closer again all the way to c4 and try to take the pawn.
Right.
So the game continues. King f1 moved 33.
It's draw.
No,
No?
the game doesn't continue.
Oh, he
King
fault us,
f1
definitely.
came along with a draw offer. So, well, this is the Berlin I like to see. It was a very, very instructive, very entertaining endgame. And the position after Krishuk's bishop d8 is the subject to additional study, because so many motives here.
Right.
And this bishop f6 and then b3 trick was
Right,
very impressive.
But you cannot really blame Maxime, because bishop on f6 and rook h8, it is so tempting, and especially what he did in the game after c takes, a takes, a4, it's also so tempting. It just doesn't work. I mean, in terms of it doesn't bring the victory.
he was playing very, very logical moves. It's just that it turns out that what Krysiuk was doing, there was nothing wrong with it either. And yeah, here we have the draw as the outcome. Well, the draw was offered and was accepted perhaps. Perhaps white is no longer better. Maybe that's the reason, right? It's like check, rook c1, I can imagine threatening once again to take. In case of king d3, some rook c2.
Right. I mean, white is not even threatening anything on the king side at the time. The pawn on g6 is not even targeted, and white will have to spend time to take the pawn on b3, which probably should liquidate to some kind of drawn endgame. So, yeah, draw makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have finished both of the semi-final games today. Let us remind you, the first game had a shocking twist when suddenly Wesley So made a very strange blunder right after the opening, right after Shahmamedyarov had employed a very interesting novelty, a2, a3, which he described a nice idea for one game, and suddenly Wesley blundered.
Shah really impressed with his explanations. So a3 was a novelty, and rook fb8.
As he said, it's a good move.
Yeah, the move that Wesley after the game was not happy about happens to be the first move of an engine. After e4, strangely enough, the engine preferred. Well, according to Shah, we were not consulting any engine, but we were looking at such moves as queen d8, queen c8, and so on. Yeah, and Wesley has played c3, which was at first was unpleasant for Mamedyarov because he didn't check it at home. Right. That's what he says, but it turns out that there was nothing to check because e5 happens to be just winning. Takes on f6.
And the line he mentioned here in the studio was that after e4, instead of the terrible c3, black could have actually made a draw with not obvious knight takes on e4.
Yeah, knight e4 is a nice move.
And what was the line again?
Bishop takes,
bishop e4,
queen takes
queen
here,
d4.
attacking both rook and the bishop. You go there, black goes there.
Bishop b6.
Takes, rook fe1. And
the only move, queen g6.
For some reason, it is very important to go queen g6, which of course is not easy to comprehend without detailed computer analysis. Right, so, after e5 it turns out that white simply won material, and rook a2 is the key move, which possibly was missed by Wesley So as well, after which white has no problem converting. So Shah wins his game 1 and only needs a draw tomorrow with the black pieces. And this is the final position from Maxim Vachier-Lagraf's game against Krysiuk.
Well, not exactly this position. I think the game ended after king f1.
King f1.
That's our analysis right there.
Yeah.
And the game was offered a draw. And I believe in this game, Krysiuk missed this move, rook d3, rook f3. At least he did not look happy over the board, but he managed to find
the defense.
Right.
So I believe we are almost ready for an interview with both Vachier-Lagraf and Krysiuk, and we will be back after that to close the show. Easy day.
Thanks a lot, Maxim Vachier-Lagraf and Alexander Krysiuk, to join us after your exciting draw in this Berlin. It's always interesting, these endgames, people get bored, but they have a lot of content inside. Alexander, how difficult was it to hold a draw?
No, of course it has a lot of content if you blunder like this. I completely missed rook d3. I just thought, okay, it's a draw because instead of bishop g5, I can play bishop f5 if I'm ambitious, or there are many sensible moves, and I just thought, okay, bishop g5, okay, just force a draw, and because I thought instead of rook d3, just, I don't know, rook e1, rook d1, and okay, just a draw. And then I even offered a draw, and then Maxim started to think, I was like, what is he thinking about? And then rook d3 came, and after this, black is almost lost. I think I think this b5 before a4 I found the only chance, because for half an hour I actually thought maybe since my draw offer was not taken, I will just resign, because it looked completely hopeless. But then, yeah, found this. And of course, then I don't know, it's like maybe there is some study like win for white, but I don't know. Also, I don't know, I could maybe play instead of bishop d8, king b7, yeah, rook f7.
Rook c8, bishop d8, bishop d6.
No, but b3.
Take.
Yes, okay, that's why I didn't play, but I mean, maybe it's not completely lost. No, that's why I didn't play.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't play, but yeah, and then after bishop d8, it looks, it smells like white should be able to win, but maybe not, or even if he can, it's in some study-like manner.
Maxim, you love studies, so there was maybe nothing. What do you think?
Well, in general, first of all, I don't think that people were bored by this game. I don't think they had any reason to. And yeah, I mean, I feel like there was a win, but I couldn't find it. And so in the end, it just petered out to a draw. Maybe I can play like bishop c3 instead of a6, but I was afraid that some c5, king d6.
H5 first?
No, take on h7, bishop c3, but then c5, and the pawn on a5 is a bit weak, so I wasn't sure. And I just thought, okay, let's just call it a draw. I mean, I thought maybe I have some outside chance of pressing, but actually there isn't, so yeah.
All right, thank you very much, and have a good game tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first day of the semi-finals comes to an end. Honestly, somewhat unexpected, because I had, suspected it might be not the longest day in the studio, but who would expect that everything will be finished in 3 hours and one of the games will be decided?
Yes, that's definitely a big surprise. I mean, when you are looking at the games of 2,750 and plus, you definitely do not expect somebody to blunder, but it did happen, and today was the day.
So Mamedyarov is leading one more time. Wesley has to win tomorrow with the white pieces. The other semi-final first draw tomorrow, it's white for Grishuk. So we can expect either neither from Grunfeld.
Most likely we are going to see a real battle, and Wesley is not going to give up because he has no choice. Otherwise he finishes his tournament with a stop in the semi-final. And either way he chooses, it's going to be a great fight tomorrow. And I think that this will be it for today. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure to do the same tomorrow, 3 p.m. local time here in Riga. We will start the second day, the second classical game of the semi-finals. Thank you for watching us. We'll be seeing you tomorrow.